of what the event needs to look like in the 21st century. The hope is it will reinvigorate enthusiasm for potential bidders. After all, the Games allow competing nations to showcase what their countries and cultures have to offer on the global stage.
It's the soft power benefits of being at the table of an international sporting event that then opens you up to politicians around the world, to investment, to brands that you would never have worked with in the past. And, we've seen if sport can be a force for good, then why shouldn't other smaller nations also have the chance to have that force for good?
Now we return to our question. Is it time to scrap the Commonwealth Games? The journey to holding the Games in Glasgow this year has prompted a rethink of the cost of the event to the host and also reignited questions surrounding its political relevance. When the state of Victoria withdrew from hosting this year's event, broad questions surfaced surrounding whether the Games were affordable and indeed politically viable given their roots in Britain's colonial past. Since then, the Commonwealth Games Federation has been at pains to recast the event as both culturally fitting and something that can be achieved within a manageable budget, not to mention a useful platform for the host country to display its credentials. If there is a view that the Games should be scrapped, then clearly the organisers disagree. The host for the Games centenary event in 2030 was confirmed in January as India's 7th largest city, Ahmedabad. One final word from our fourth expert witness, Gail McPherson.
Nigeria are still interested then for 2034, and they would not perhaps be as big as what India will be able to deliver. And so again, they are looking to say, we're interested in this different model and one that's about sustainability, one that's about inclusion. So this is very much an approach where you're looking, saying the changes that we make have to be meaningful. They have to be something that we can use the events to leverage, to make change that we want to make anyway, that can benefit the city, the nation, the country and the Commonwealth going forward.
You've been listening to The Inquiry. This episode was presented by me, Tanya Beckett. The producer was Matt Tolson, the researcher Evie Yabsley, the editor Tom Bigwood and the technical producer Craig Boardman.
That was The Inquiry from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho here on CBC.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page. I'm Corey Funk, sitting in today for Marcy Marcusa. We do have a lovely spring day ahead, but also once that lovely spring day is done, there are some weather statements that there's some unpleasant, less than spring weather coming our way. I'm going to have some details on that for you shortly here, but first, let's check in with Heather Wells with a look at news headlines.
Good morning. Well, a local developer is trying to make home ownership more affordable in Steinbach. Waldor Neustetter and Steinbach Credit Union are offering mortgages with down payments of just 1%. And Neustetter is putting up his own money as collateral. We're going to hear more about that. As well, Mark Carney says plans to expand the Port of Churchill are a top priority. The Prime Minister making those comments as he met yesterday with Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew in Ottawa. Kinew says there's big potential for a trade corridor to Churchill involving improvements to the port, rail access, and other infrastructure. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
Well, as promised, yes. So a couple things to keep an eye out for weather-wise. So southern Manitoba, there is a special weather statement for southern Manitoba, mostly because once this warm weather comes through, the weather is going to plummet. The temperature is going to plummet to -5 overnight. And actually, there's a chance of some freezing rain kind of right along the Trans-Canada corridor throughout southern Manitoba. And that may cause for slippery conditions. And up north in the Pond Flin Flon, there's actually a snowfall warning for parts of northern Manitoba, particularly around the Pond Flin Flon, which means you could get as much as 15 to 20 centimeters of snow through Wednesday, this later today into tonight. So we'll be keeping an eye on that as well throughout the day. Stay tuned. Coming up this next half hour on Information Radio. Canadian film and TV is having a bit of a moment, from heated rivalry to Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie. We are going to talk about why it's having a moment and how maybe you could even take part in that moment. That's coming up right just ahead here. We'll be right back here on Information Radio after World Report. Stay tuned.
Canada Reads 2026. 5 perceptive panelists, 5 blockbuster books, 4 days of smart and sassy deliberation and debate. But there can only be one winner. Ali Hassan hosts Canada's favorite book battle, Canada Reads 2026. One book to build bridges. All this week on radio, TV, the Listen app, and on CBC Jam. For more, go to cbcbooks.ca.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. U.S. President Donald Trump says the war in Iran is nearly over. And as soon as it is, he says fuel prices will drop.
I think oil will be down to the levels it was. You know, they said I expect oil to be high at the midterms. I don't expect that. When this is over, I think the stock market is going to boom.
Trump also says peace talks could resume in Pakistan over the next 2 days. This, as the effectiveness of the U.S. blockade in the Strait of Hormuz is brought into question. We get the latest from the CBC's Sasha Petrusik in Jerusalem.
The U.S. military insists its blockade of Iranian ports is holding, a naval noose meant to strangle Iran's economy by keeping it from exporting oil, or at the very least, to force concessions at the bargaining table. Indeed, further negotiations may happen in a matter of days, says U.S. President Donald Trump.
We'll see what happens. I think they want to make a deal very badly.
He talks about the war in the past tense in a previously recorded interview on Fox News this morning.
I think it's close to over, yeah. I view it as very close to over.
Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian says Iran is not looking for trouble, that it's simply defending itself. Statements from Iran do seem less provocative in the last day or two. It has not reacted militarily to the blockade, despite earlier threats to attack ports in neighboring Gulf states. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance says he left Iranian negotiators with an offer from Trump when talks broke off last weekend.
He wants to make the grand bargain.
An offer Vance suggests would be a step toward normalizing relations between Washington and Tehran. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
And Donald Trump is lashing out at the Pope again on social media. Overnight, Trump said that someone should tell Pope Leo that Iran has killed at least 42,000 innocent, completely unarmed protesters in recent months. And he added it is absolutely unacceptable for Iran to ever have a nuclear bomb. Pope Leo has been vocal about his opposition to the U.S.-Israeli war in Iran. He says he does not fear the Trump administration. Berlin is hosting an international donor conference to address the impact of the Sudanese civil war. The conflict has been marked by massacres, severe food shortages, and the widespread displacement of civilians. The UN calls it the world's forgotten war. The violence erupted 3 years ago today, and as Ithel Musa reports, there's still no end in sight.
Inside a sprawling displacement camp in North Darfur, families gather to collect water. 14 million people in Sudan have been forced to flee their homes as the civil war rages on.
After 3 years of the conflict in Sudan, I think the situation has just gotten worse.
Abdurrahman Ali with the NGO Care Sudan says about 65% of Sudan's total population is in need of humanitarian assistance because of a war being fought between two rival factions: the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF paramilitary.
Both of them have basically waged a war against the Sudanese people.
Khalid Mustafa Medani is a professor of political science and Islamic studies at McGill University.
This is a war about power, a war about retaining resources.
It is estimated that more than 150,000 people have been killed, and sexual violence against women and girls is so widespread the UN says it's become a defining feature of the conflict. Complicating things on the ground now is the U.S.-Israel territorial war with Iran. There are fears the increasing cost of fuel will disrupt the movement of much-needed life-saving supplies. Idil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
Advocates for people seeking asylum in Canada say a Carney government's new law is putting lives at risk. Bill C-12 was passed last month, and it gives Ottawa the power to deport some refugee claimants before a hearing with the Immigration and Refugee Board. Tens of thousands of people have now received letters telling them to leave Canada. CBC News has learned a Trudeau-era immigration minister sought those same powers but didn't end up getting them. Rafi Boudjikanian has the story.
It is time to make the adjustments to stabilize the immigration system that we need.
Former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in October 2024 setting the stage for a major policy shift on bringing newcomers to Canada.
We will reduce the number of immigrants we bring in over the next 3 years.
It turns out he was being asked for more behind the scenes. CBC News has obtained a letter former Immigration Minister Mark Miller wrote to Trudeau that fall, seeking the ability to stop most migrants from making refugee claims if they've spent more than a year in Canada, and stopping irregular border crossers between Canada and the U.S. from making claims after 2 weeks, powers that never passed under Trudeau, that he and Miller never publicly spoke about at the time.
Asylum is not a shortcut to immigration.
Current Immigration Minister Lina Diab introduced legislation seeking those exact same abilities, telling a parliamentary committee last October Bill C-12 is needed to deal with the strain of excess asylum claims.
We're building a modern, efficient system.
That legislation passed at the end of March. Diab's office says it cannot comment on why Trudeau did not act on her predecessor's request. The Immigration Department says it expects to send some 30,000 migrants letters telling them their applications for refugee status may be ineligible. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
Ontario is planning to expand its jails, adding thousands of beds over the next 20 years. It will increase capacity by more than 60%. Michelle Song takes us through what the Ontario government is planning and why some experts say it won't necessarily keep communities safe.
This is the wrong direction to go in.
After his PhD student obtained provincial documents through Freedom of Information laws, University of Ottawa criminology professor Justin Peguis says his jaw was on the floor, shocked by Ontario's plan to add nearly 6,000 jail beds in 24 years.
We're diverting money away from things that actually could make us safer now. Permanent supportive housing, mental health care in the community, harm reduction.
Peguis says it's unclear where those beds will be added, and Premier Doug Ford has been firm on his tough-on-crime approach.
I don't care if you stack them 10 high. These are criminals that broke the law, and they're going to be held accountable.
But criminal defense lawyer Natasha Beatman-Brenner says offenders in provincial jails aren't those accused of serious crimes like murder or sexual assault. They go to federal prisons, which aren't part of this plan.
That anyone who is serving a sentence in a provincial jail is serving a sentence that's 2 years or less, 2 years less a day or less, which means that these are individuals who are going to be back out in our communities in pretty short periods of time.
The documents reveal the plan is made up of 3 phases from now until 2050, and the first phase is made up of already approved projects, resulting in more than 1,100 beds in the next 6 years. Michelle Song, CBC News, Toronto.
And finally, a team of Canadian Rangers is coming off a major Arctic endurance test, 52 days patrolling the edge of the Northwest Passage. As the CBC's Murray Brewster tells us, the mission was part endurance test, part high-tech proving ground.
So we just did 5,200 kilometers in the coldest winter that anyone remembers.
Lieutenant Colonel Travis Haynes, commander of the 1st Canadian Ranger Patrol Group. He and 9 other soldiers recently completed a presence patrol, testing cutting-edge surveillance technology against real-world conditions.
But to put it in practical terms, everything freezes, let alone your hands. All comms devices are always made for people without gloves on.
Increasing surveillance across the vast northern frontier is one of the military and the federal government's major preoccupations. The Rangers are often called the country's eyes and ears in the north, but getting what they see and hear in real time into the hands of commanders and decision makers has long been a challenge.
There's no satellite signal, there's no telecom operating up there. You're literally in a completely communications desert.
Elliot Pence is the CEO of Dominion Dynamics, which has developed a software system that pairs with military communications gear and allows the Rangers to communicate and share information among themselves and pass it along instantaneously when there's a downlink available.
Over the last 60 days, what we've created is the ability to push this information up into a web app, a common operating picture, that allows the strategic command to understand and essentially track and trace and follow along.
Pence says it's Canadian technology, which could be useful in the deserts or the jungle or other far-flung locations. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page. Lovely spring day, but some not-so-great weather ahead. We actually have a couple weather statements. We're going to get more details on that. Potential freezing rain in southern Manitoba tonight after a lovely spring day, but also snowfall warnings in parts of northern Manitoba. We'll get the details just ahead. Coming up this hour on the show, the Liberals have secured a majority government, but what does it mean for opposition parties like the Conservatives and the NDP? We're going to break that down. Also, Canadian films are drawing a lot of international attention right now. And spoiler alert, it's because they're really good. We're going to break down why, though, Canadian film is having a moment. Also, people in Peguis First Nation have been working feverishly to protect their homes from flooding. We're going to get an update from its chief coming up. But right now, though, it's 6:11. Let's check in with Heather Wells with a look at news headlines.
Good morning. Well, a First Nation is asking Manitoba to remove a gas main from its land. That line will connect two stretches of a hydro pipeline project the province greenlit just last month. Roseau River Councillor Evan Roberts says the community faces dangers like pipeline ruptures while not getting any benefits. We'll hear more from him. And people in Peguis First Nation, as you mentioned, have just a week to protect more than 200 homes from spring floods. The province says the Fisher River will likely start cresting on April 23rd. And Chief Stan Bird says it is a massive undertaking with crews already hard at it. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That's Heather Wells at the CBC News Desk. Let's say hello to the crew this morning. Darren Morash is our YouTube producer. Sierra Sanders is our studio director, keeping an eye on your commute. And Abby Adiemi is our studio technician and bringing the good news / bad news today with your weather.
No, let's start with the good news. We will warm up close to 18 degrees today.
Yes.
And then that heat that we will see is going to make the system we've been tracking for the last 24 to 48 hours actually bring in what is coming from the Dauphin side of the province, and it will definitely touch most parts of the province. Hence, you're still going to enjoy your Wednesday. You're still going to enjoy the sunshine we'll get today. You're still going to enjoy that highs of 18. However, this late seasonal winter storm coming will be arriving later today, more like overnight Wednesday into Thursday, and we should be seeing this affecting most of the regions in the southern part of the province. We're looking at about let's just say about 8 to probably Corey, how do I place it now? 8 centimeters. Some areas might get 8 centimeters of snow, and we're forecasting maybe 10 in some areas in the southern part. But this is the system coming later tonight. So if you have, if you're thinking the snow is going to be impacting you this morning, not today, it's still overnight into tomorrow morning. So prepare for that. That's coming from the Red River, the Pembina Valley, the Westman, all the way towards the Parkland region. And then up north, we're also tracking a snowfall warning, which is in place. We're anticipating 15 to 20 centimeters of snow for regions around the Pa and Flin Flon. So you need to anticipate for that also. But let's talk about today. Forecast for Winnipeg and nearby and most of the regions in the south. We're looking at mainly sunny conditions. Most of the regions will warm up close to 20 degrees today. Winnipeg, we get to 18. Current temperatures, we are at 2 degrees. We're going to stay around 2, 3. We might see 4 degrees in between before we climb to that 18 and then prepare for those freezing rain that will be coming overnight into tomorrow morning, and some areas might be getting snow. Up north, we're still dealing with wind chills close to minus 38 as you travel towards Churchill this morning. Current temperatures to Dooley Lake, minus 26.
Winter just does not want to let go.
Yeah, it's just a late season thing, and we have to deal with it.
I don't even know what today's version is, our 6th spring that we're having so far, Fool Spring.
Yeah, this is the 6th one.
Oh my gosh, it's wild. Okay, well, thank you very much, Abby, for nothing. Thank you, though. Sierra Sanders, keeping an eye on your commute. What's going on?
Well, the groundhog was right.
The groundhog was too right.
I hate to say it,
I know.
but the groundhog was
kind
right.
of wrong, because I think he anticipated 6 weeks of winter, but I think we're coming up on 1,000 weeks of winter.
Yeah, I agree. But so far the commute is not looking too bad out there. The commuter line has been pretty quiet so far here as we kick off the show and people start to kick off their Wednesday mornings. But the number to call throughout the show if there is something that is popping up on your commute, whether you are here in the city or out on the highways, is 204-788-3093.
Well, if we want to keep the not-so-great Manitoba news train rolling here, despite the late season rally that brought them closer to a spot in the playoffs, the Winnipeg Jets were not able to pull themselves out of the hole. The final blow was a 6-2 loss Monday night to the Vegas Golden Knights. Jeff Buckieran saw the whole season unfold. He's a self-proclaimed Jets superfan. He spoke with CBC's guest host, Julie Buckingham, on Up to Speed yesterday, and she asked him what was on his mind when he watched the crushing loss Monday night.
The first period, they were outshot there by a fair amount, and Hellebuck held them in there, but that second period, things just didn't go our way, and I guess it just seemed to snowball from there, and the end result is pretty much what it was, and that was it to the end of the season, or at least our playoff hopes.
Yeah. Well, they still have, as I mentioned, 2 more games this week. A final home game on Thursday, which is Fan Appreciation Night. What kind of mood do you think those fans will be in for that game, and what do you hope to see from the team, even knowing that they're out of the playoffs?
As far as the mood in the building on Thursday, it's going to be disappointment for one, because when you're basically dead last at one point of the season, and you've come so close to getting there and falling short, then a lot of fans will be disappointed, and you'll probably sense that in the building come Thursday night.
And mind you, if you give people free stuff, which is going to happen on Thursday, that often puts them in the good mood. But
everybody likes a Winnipeg deal,
right.
So free is good.
Exactly. And I know they're doing a bunch of giveaways and that kind of stuff. So what were some of the highs and some of the lows for this season for you?
Well, as far as the highs, I think we saw it last night when Mark Scheifele got to the 100-point mark, first time in Jets 2.0 history. So that's a nice milestone, or a personal milestone, I guess, to see. As far as other milestones, is to see some of the players actually play in the Olympics and come home with some hardware, or even just to go there and experience what it's like. That's probably a high mark right there. As far as the low marks,
this is it.
This is it. The 11-game winless streak, that's definitely up there. You look back at that stretch, and if they had maybe even, 6 points out of that streak, or gained 6 points out of the streak, we'd be sitting in a playoff spot right now.
Right.
It's unfortunate. Injuries did kind of hurt, especially at the beginning of the year when we didn't have Perfetti, Lowry, Sandberg. You want to start off the season strong with your full complement, but that just wasn't the case. And, after last year's phenomenal season of the President's Trophy, we were all expecting big things, and unfortunately it just didn't it just didn't happen to be so.
What do you think if Coach Arniel gave you a call and said, "Hey, Jeff, what do you think the team needs to do to turn things around next year?" What would you say?
Oh boy, where do you begin? I think it'll start at the draft this year. This year's draft is particularly strong, so they should be getting a very good player. Maybe not ready to play next year, but probably somewhere down the road. Talking with a few people, I think if anything, a second line center or a potential first line center. Because as good as Mark Scheifele is, he can't play forever. So I think the succession has to start now. Maybe on the back end on defense, they need a good defender, a big size defender who could take care of business in the back end.
Like a Buff 2.0.
Well, if you can manage to clone that'd be great. We'd love to see that. Free agency, losing Ehlers last summer, it hurts for sure, because I know they tried to replace him with by committee with Taves coming home to play for his hometown team, which from a marketing point of view that was great, but to find 30 goals in this league, it's kind of hard, and to do it by committee with what we got in free agency, I just didn't see it happening. If it did, then great, but for some reason the experiment didn't work. If anything, I think we have to get younger, and we have to find, if it's possible, find some players in free agency, those that want to come to Winnipeg and those that can help the team out, not just a short term, but in a relatively long term period of time.
About a minute remaining here. It's the end of the season after these couple of games for the Jets, but the Manitoba Moose, after a couple of seasons, is now getting a spot in the AHL playoffs. So do you feel good about that? Will you take that post-season energy to maybe some of the Moose games?
Well, I've been going to Moose games since they came back in 2014, 2015. So definitely I hopped on the bandwagon then. I'm not going to jump off anytime soon. They do have some good young talent there, so I will be following them on hopefully a long Calder Cup run. Say that 5 times fast.
And maybe you can wear some white stuff there at those games.
Well, like I said before, there will be some playoff hockey in Winnipeg. Not the one that we've seen for the past few years, but you know what? It'll still be fun to watch.
That was Jeff Bekiran, a Winnipeg Jets superfan, speaking with CBC's Julie Buckingham. And the losing streak continued last night. Jets lost 5-3 to the Utah Mammoth. And now the Jets have one last home game against the San Jose Sharks tomorrow.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. It's news you can trust, delivered when you want and where you want on Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1, local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
Well, even though the Jets are losing, one thing that is winning these days is Canadian television. If you like movies and TV, you may have noticed that Canada is having a bit of a moment right now.
The Canada-Russia final showcasing the two most talked about prospects in the world. Canada's Shane Hollander.
Shane Hollander, I wanted to introduce myself.
Okay. And Russia's Ilya Rozanov.
You're an awesome player to watch.
Yes.
Very good at hockey.
The best, probably.
We will be seeing each other a lot.
Yeah, Boston and Montreal play against each other often.
Roz, you gotta see this.
He's like a huge movie star.
Are there any gay hockey players?
None that have said it publicly.
There's a good chance you probably recognize that trailer. This winter, ultra-Canadian hockey romance heated rivalry dominated the streaming wars, and Canadian movies like Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie, generated international buzz. And today is National Canadian Film Day, and joining me now is Eric Tisch. He manages National Canadian Film Day programs for Real Canada. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So, in the big scheme of things, we've had shows like, shows blow up before, like Schitt's Creek, for example. But just how big has this year been for Canadian film and TV?
Yeah, I mean, it's undeniable. It's a big moment. The shows you mentioned, Heated Rivalry, Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie, of course. It's like they are making these types of international waves, and we've been seeing it in the way that we've been delivering our programs. It's we do National Gay Film Day every year. This has been our biggest year ever. We have been lucky enough to have like over 2,000 screenings, which is our most ever. And then on the international side, I think you're seeing the consequences of that, because we had a rise last year. We had 90 international screenings in 49 countries. This year that's jumped up to 150 screenings in all those countries. And it's like, we are seeing this, across the board in Canada and around the world. And I think people are seeing this, they're seeing Canadian content, and they're asking the right question, which is, what else can I see? What are these other Canadian movies that I can go and watch? And I think that's a really exciting thing to do. Yeah.
So why do you think then that the Canadian filmmakers are having a moment right now?
I think it's not coming out of nowhere. I think that across all these stories, you look at that, you look at Youngblood as also a big hit lately, and these are all directors that and creators that have been working for a very long time. Jacob Tierney from Heated Rivalry. This is him building his career. He did before that. He did Shoresy, he did Letterkenny, and he did The Trotsky, one of my favorite Canadian films. And it's you've been seeing this, where if you support artists throughout their whole careers, this is the fruits of it. And we're just seeing that, there are all these filmmakers that are suddenly, they're suddenly coming out of nowhere. They have been working at this, and we're getting their hits. And I think that shows this isn't going to necessarily stop. I think this is something that we're going to be able to see a little more of too.
So you mentioned there the importance of supporting filmmakers, especially early on, right? So they can develop to make these kind of things. But from a policy, government, industry perspective, what do those institutions need to do to keep that momentum going?
I think it's betting on creators. I mean, we have this great industry in Canada. And a lot of these, we have these productions across the country, and they're all set up to tell these stories. And, for a long time, we've been, they were devoted to telling, Hollywood coming and filming here, which I want to continue because that gives people money, and that's great. But it's an opportunity to say, okay, right now, let's strike on this. Let's give this a chance and see what happens when we mobilize our industry, tell more Canadian stories, and have this type of, from the start to finish, this is shot in Canada, like Heated Rivalry, like Nirvana the Band Show, like Undertone, which had the biggest opening for any Canadian film in the last 10 years, a small horror film, fully shot in Canada. And when you see a success like that, it shows that's something that people want to see. And especially in Canada, that's something that we want to see more of. Yeah.
And maybe some people might be skeptical because maybe they think that this is just a flash in the pan, right? And I think Canadian television has somewhat of a reputation for being kind of too earnest sometimes, a little bit cheesy, maybe a little bit like maybe having some kind of low budget vibes. But why do you think that we need Canadian films, and actually Canadian films are something that can hold up a reputation internationally for the long term?
I think that, you mentioned budget. I think that one thing that I find really interesting about Canadian film is how much we're able to do with small budgets. We have, with filmmakers, that is something that we do very well because of the way that, it is often the case that, you're given a small budget and you have to do something with it. And I'm always in awe of, filmmakers who can do an amazing film. What happens when you give that filmmaker a bigger budget is my question, because I think then, you look at that and you say, okay, well, this was amazing. I want to see what comes next. And that's what we've done with Jacob Tierney, with Matt Johnson, with Hubert Davis, who did Youngblood. We've been giving them this opportunity, and we've been seeing it works. And, and I think it's not necessarily, only with film as well, with television. This is the first season of Heated Rivalry. Last year we had North of North, the #1 show on Netflix in a lot of countries. It's having a season 2. Heated Rivalry has a season 2. This type of momentum through those shows, through other shows, we're going to see this. I think this is a really good opportunity to get on board with Canadian content and show, okay, we're going to be supporting these stories, and what else is out there? Let's find out.
And finally here, maybe if there's some listeners here in Manitoba, they want to celebrate National Canadian Film Day, where can they catch a screening?
Yeah, I mean, so we have, like I said, 2,000 screens across the country, as well as over 200 films that are going to be showing on broadcast and on streaming. But if you're in Winnipeg, we'll be showing. We have a bunch of events. You can look on our listings on canfilmday.ca. But also we have, like to give a couple examples, you can watch Nirvana the Band, the show, the movie is at the Millennium Branch of the Winnipeg Library. We also have the Myland Kicks. We're doing a preview across the country of that. That's coming out on Friday. You can get a sneak peek at, I think it's St. Vital Cinema, Silver City. And so those are some examples, but check it out. There's tons of different films, tons of things. Go find out and go find something new. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Eric. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, and happy National Canadian Film Day.
Yes, thank you. Eric Tisch manages National Canadian Film Day programs for Real Canada. He joined us from Toronto. Stay tuned. Your business report is coming up, and the International Monetary Fund has downgraded its economic outlook for the global economy. So we're going to get the details behind that coming up after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it's 2 degrees. Are you ready to feel some spring? We're going to be sunny, windy, and warm today, a high of 18. But there is a special weather statement for southern Manitoba, including Winnipeg, and there's a snowfall warning for the north. All of this as cold air comes our way. Winnipeg starts to feel that overnight. Roseau River says it will take legal action if the province does not remove a gas main from its territory. The pipeline runs across the First Nation. It will connect to 2 stretches of a natural gas pipe set to start construction this year. Roseau River Councillor Rachel Ferreira says they've gone without fair compensation for years.
We're ready to work together, but it has to be done right away, not decades later. And it has to be fairness and respect and making sure our people finally benefit.
A hydro report says while the line runs through the community, Roseau River doesn't have access to the natural gas services. The province and Manitoba Hydro say they are still looking into the matter and can't comment at this time. People in Peguis First Nation have a week to protect more than 200 homes from spring floods. The province says the Fisher River will likely start cresting on April 23rd. Chief Stan Bird says it is a massive undertaking to prepare.
We have crews doing the conventional sandbagging. We're using super sandbags. We moved to the clay dikes. This will offer the higher level flood protection.
Bird says the province has been helping, but there is still a lot of work to do. He says in the long term, the low-lying community needs retention ponds to protect homes from almost annual spring flooding. You can hear more on this story coming up right after this newscast right here on Information Radio. A local developer is trying to make home ownership more affordable in Steinbach. Waldo Neustaedter and Steinbach Credit Union are offering mortgages with down payments of just 1%. Neustaedter puts up his own money as collateral. He says he wants to help people in his community become homeowners.
It would come back to my faith and living out that faith and giving back to the community and having a purpose in life and folks that need a bit of a hand, that it helps them.
Steinbach Credit Union has sold hundreds of the mortgages to people having trouble breaking into the housing market. There hasn't been a single repossession or foreclosure. Neustaedter is now building a similar development in nearby Mitchell with more than 200 homes, duplexes, and townhouses. Mark Carney says plans to expand the Port of Churchill are a top priority. The Prime Minister making that comment before meeting with Manitoba Premier Rob Canoe yesterday in Ottawa. Canoe says there is big potential for a trade corridor to Churchill, which would involve improvements to the port, rail access, and other infrastructure. Now, the plan was among several quote, transformative project shortlisted by the federal government last year. After yesterday's meeting, Canoe says he and Carney have agreed to explore options to increase shipment of critical minerals from the port. More economic fallout from the war landing in Canadian shopping carts. CBC News confirms some major food suppliers are implementing a fuel surcharge as the cost of getting food to the supermarket skyrockets. Canada is one of 10 countries releasing a joint statement criticizing the killings of UN peacekeepers in Lebanon and calling for an urgent end to hostilities in that country. The statement comes after the deaths of 3 Indonesian peacekeepers last month. The UN says preliminary findings show 1 was killed by an Israeli tank projectile and 2 by an improvised explosive device, most likely placed by the militant group Hezbollah. You can hear more on all of these stories coming up on World Report at 7. Another Winnipeg Jets loss as the season draws to a close.
Connor shoots and scores. Kyle Connor banks it in. He's up to 39 on the season.
Kyle Connor in the second period there on TSN, his 39th goal of the season. Even though the Jets showed spark by the third period, it wasn't enough. The host Utah Mammoth outscoring Winnipeg 5-3. Connor says even though they didn't make the playoffs,
there's still a lot of pride in there, and every time you put on the uniform, you gotta respect the game out there and your teammates and fight for each other.
And they get one more chance to do that. The Jets' final game of the season is tomorrow night here at home at Canada Life Centre, hosting the San Jose Sharks. Tomorrow night is also Fan Appreciation Night. You can find the latest news updated throughout your day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That's Heather Wells at your CBC News desk. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Corey Funk, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. And Abby, we get a little taste of spring today, and then winter comes back in full force. And actually, even up north, it's pretty wintry there right now, isn't it?
I was thinking, since up north is already getting the winter vibes, we down south, let's just say today we enjoy the final pleasant spring day before a system comes in and would mess things up. More like a late seasonal winter storm, bringing freezing rain and snowfall to some areas down south. Hence, southern Manitoba bracing for this sharp weather shift as we see that system sweep in tonight through tomorrow. While today stays pleasant, we're going to see temperatures in the teens. Winnipeg will likely get to 18 today. The biggest concern is the risk of freezing rain along the south of the Trans-Canada Highway through the Red River and, of course, through southwestern Manitoba. But we should be seeing the central region should be preparing for about 4 to 8 centimeters of snow. Now, for the northern parts, we have a snowfall warning there also. For the power flame flow, we're looking at heavy system really moving through today, and these areas are looking at about 15 to 20 centimeters of snow, which will definitely be making travel really challenging until the system tapers off later tonight. Also, there's a risk of freezing rain mixed with the system that's going to be rapidly changing conditions if you are in that part of the province. But for today, Winnipeg, we're currently at 2 degrees and tracking things. We start gaining 2 more degrees every hour till we get to the 18, close to maybe 6 p.m. later tonight. Lots of sunshine in the forecast. Get ready for some windy conditions to go with that. As mentioned, we warm up to 18, but that messy winter mix is going to be arriving tonight, so we're bracing for that sharp shift as the mercury drops to -5 overnight. For most of the regions down south, we're seeing temperatures from Portage la Prairie, Morden, Winkler, Brandon, all these regions seeing temperatures around 1 at this time. Gimli at 0. Most of the regions, Brandon is going to get to 16. The Pembina Valley region, we're tracking 20 degrees in that part of the province, and Dauphin gets to a high of 12 degrees later today. While for the power flame flow, where we're looking at temperatures around -10, the snowfall coming your way. Thompson, Gillam, Lynn Lake between -14 and -19, now warming up to -10. To Dooley Lake, you're clear at -25. You get to -13. There's a wind chill, a vibe going on there. It feels like -38 outside at this time. And for Churchill, you're mainly clear with the sunshine making its appearance already there. You're currently at -22. You warm up to -13 later. So, Curry, it's just enjoy the last full blast of that spring feel, and don't change your tires today.
So I couldn't hear your weather forecast over the sounds of Manitoba's collective groans. It was just drowning everything
Sorry,
out.
Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Abby. So, Sierra Sanders, what's going on the commute?
Yeah, it's still pretty quiet out there. Haven't received calls on the commuter line. So to me, that sounds like that things are moving along smoothly. But if you are traveling tomorrow or planning on getting out on the roads tomorrow, might want to start maybe planning ahead or thinking about leaving a little early or accommodating the weather that is going to be coming overnight. I know I'm tired of wearing my boots, my Blundstones. I'd love to put them away and trade them for Birkenstocks, but we're still working at it. So I'm sure others might be feeling the same. But if you have anything to let me know about on the commute today, whether you are in the city or out on the highways, I'd love to know about it. That number to call is 204-788-3093.
Thank you very much, Sierra. That's Sierra Sanders, your studio director. Well, next up here on Information Radio, let's check in with Crystal Lee Ramlakan with your business report. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Corey.
So the International Monetary Fund, it's downgraded its economic outlook for the global economy. Can you just break down the reasons why?
Yes, well, conflict in the Middle East has upended energy markets, as we know, and compounded geopolitical uncertainty. So the IMF projects global growth to slow this year compared to last year, and inflation is expected to increase. So the IMF has outlined two downside scenarios if oil prices continue to surge. If prices stay around $100 per barrel this year, the IMF sees the global economy only growing 2.5%. and inflation hitting more than 5%. And if oil costs even more than that, well, growth could slow even more, and it could lead to a global recession. Now, oil importing countries and Gulf countries that cannot get their own oil and gas to world markets are being hit particularly hard by the war. Canada is more insulated in that sense, as we are a major energy producer and exporter, but the country still faces headwinds from trade uncertainty. And in Canada, growth is also projected to slow this year compared to last year, before recovering next year. Now, Canadians will get a better sense of the country's finances later this month on April 28th, when the federal government tables its spring economic statement. The update will be closely watched as Canadians are experiencing rising energy prices, though. Yesterday, Prime Minister Mark Carney announced the government is temporarily removing the federal excise tax on gas and diesel, and suggested the update will have additional measures to support Canadians. So I'm sure people will be very curious to see what those could be.
Yes, we'll be watching closely for that. Next here, convenience store chain 7-Eleven expects to close hundreds of locations in Canada and the U.S. So what do we know about that?
Yes. So 7-Eleven's North American operator plans to close 645 stores this fiscal year, outpacing the 205 locations it forecasts it will be opening during that same period. Now, the closures do not include conversions to gas. Now, the closures do include, conversions to gas-only stores, though. So that's part of the calculation here. And the company has not immediately explained the closures or specified which locations could be impacted. There are more than 86,000 stores across 19 countries, with more than 13,000 locations in Canada and the U.S. Now, the convenience giant has closed hundreds of underperforming locations over the years, and the latest cuts arrive as higher prices strain consumers worldwide, like we were just talking about. And the company has been looking for new opportunities for growth. Last year, it outlined a plan to boost its offerings, including in investing in more fresh food and expanding delivery service. And I think you guys talked about this on the show when it happened. You know, they did this whole campaign about their egg salad sandwich that's very popular in Japan, but looks like maybe the company is, still struggling.
People just prefer their grandma's egg salad sandwiches here, I think, more so.
Yes.
Next up here, we've also done a lot of stories on the lack of legroom on airplanes, but it seems like the pendulum may be swinging the other way. Bunk beds are taking off on some new planes.
Yes. So economy passengers can soon pay to lie down for a few hours on Air New Zealand's newest planes. The 6 individual spaces include a mattress with bedding, privacy curtain, reading light, charging ports, and amenity kit. And yes, the cabin crew will change the bedding between each session. So customers can book a bed for 4 hours at a time, but it is going to cost you. It's going to cost you $495 per session. And so, the beds will be available on the 17-hour flight between New York and New Zealand, which ranks among the longest flights in the world. And bookings open next month for select flights starting in November. Air New Zealand also offers a sky couch where the footrests lift up and 3 seats turn into a flat surface where economy passengers can kind of stretch out. United Airlines released plans for their own triple seat to couch conversion this year that received a mix of reactions. And Air Canada has also just unveiled new long-haul cabins with lie-flat seats. So the airline says the new changes will provide upgrades across all tiers from economy to Air Canada's signature class. They will first be rolled out on a new fleet of Airbus and Boeing Dreamliner planes, though. But experts say the redesign is a calculated experiment with a very narrow rollout, and that Air Canada's most used planes for international flights are not yet slated for these upgrades.
So most of us are just going to have to just lean back that chair and feel like a jerk. Perfect.
Oh, yeah, I know. It's such an inner conflict.
It is.
Especially when the person in front of you does it and you're like, okay, this table now is touching me.
Yeah, I know.
Or I can't even get it all the way down.
But it does help me sleep a little bit when I can lean back. I know it's tough. If anyone could solve that problem, they'll be a true millionaire. Thank you very much, Krista Lee.
All right, thanks, Corey.
That was Krista Lee Ramlakan with your business news. Well, as things begin to melt, flooding still a concern for the Interlake area here in Manitoba. People in Peguis First Nation have been working feverishly to protect their homes from flooding. And as of April 13th, the province says nearly 110,000 filled sandbags have been delivered to the community. The province has also delivered thousands of super sandbags to help protect the local infrastructure. The Fisher River will likely start cresting on April 23rd, and Chief Stan Bird spoke with CBC's Alana Cole yesterday about how flood preparations are going.
Well, my biggest concern obviously would be, not being ready. I mean, every effort is being made to protect the homes and the infrastructure, but it's a massive, massive undertaking. Like, we're talking approximately between 200 to 225 homes. And according to the flood forecast today, we only have 7 days to prepare. We've been working hard for the last week and a half or so. We have crews doing the conventional sandbagging. We're using super sandbags. We moved to the clay dikes. This will offer the higher level flood protection. We're also using tiger tubes for those homes that may be at lower risk. And the homes are being assessed, and the use of these different options, those things are based on things like the site conditions and access to the home, the time available before the waters arrive, like at what risk are they once the waters arrive, the weather conditions, temperature conditions, the required height of protection that's needed. So anything past a meter, for example, we should go according to the clay dikes or the super sandbags. But again, that develops on other factors, some of which I just mentioned. So yeah, there's just a lot of work is being done. The Office of the Fire Commissioner is here, provincial staff and volunteers. We had a church group that was here yesterday. Rubicon is here. The Emergency Management Organization is here. It's just an all-out effort that's been going now for well over a week. And, people are getting tired. I see that in my people. some of the older people that have stepped up, they're getting tired. The grandmothers, the grandfathers, the elderly people, they're also working, but they're contributing.
This is something that people living in Peguis have had to experience and go through many times. And so I know you just mentioned people are getting tired. How are people feeling when there's concerns that they could face another flood, pretty bad flood this year?
I think, the best way to characterize, I guess, our people is that they're resilient, and despite what we face, there's always hope. Our people have never given up hope, and the fact that we face this every year, our people have become desensitized to what that brings. And the best way to explain that is when you think of spring and all that it brings, the warm weather, all these, the flowers and the sun, etc. That's really a period of time where there's a change in the season. Well, that change doesn't really happen with our people, because when that season starts to change, this period of spring and all its beauty, our people don't get to experience that because every year we're facing flood. I guess that's the best way for me to explain it.
Do you feel like you're getting enough help from the province?
There's always more that's required. Like, until our people are allowed to live their lives free of, annual flooding, where their homes are free of the mold, where there's no external forces that are breaking up the family, and our children being brought up in broken homes, because that's what it brings when our people are displaced and they're forced to live in Winnipeg. And they're out of the community for years. We have members that are still in Winnipeg after the 2011 flood. This creates a disconnect with community. And of course, there's all these other social ills that are picked up and transplanted at some point within the community. And it's how our people are forced to live their lives. Like, it's utter madness.
That was Peguis Chief Stan Bird speaking with CBC's Alana Cole yesterday.
The fire hose of news from America can feel like a lot these days.
If you're trying to figure out what to make of it all, we got you.
I'm Katie Simpson.
And I'm Paul Hunter. We're correspondents here in Washington,
working just around the corner from where much of the action is taking place.
2 blocks from the White House.
And that's the name of our new podcast.
For top-notch analysis of U.S. politics from a Canadian perspective, find 2 blocks from the White House on CBC Listen and wherever you get your podcasts.
6:51 right now. Reminder that there's a couple of weather statements in effect. Currently, a snowfall warning for parts of northern Manitoba, the Paw, Flin Flon in particular. Already probably seeing some snow right now, and you can expect by the end of the day into Wednesday night, you may get 15 to 20 centimeters of snow in that part of the province. Also, special weather statement for southern Manitoba as well today. Even though we are expected to have about 18 degrees or so, there could be some freezing rain starting tonight once those temperatures start to plummet. So tomorrow morning by this time, we could actually even have some slippery conditions out there. So just a heads up, and we may even see some snow as well. So just a taste of spring we get today. Well, next up here on the show, the Liberals have secured a majority government after sweeping 3 federal by-elections this week. And now Prime Minister Mark Carney says it's, quote, time to get serious, unquote. And he's calling for all parties to work together. And for more on exactly what that means for opposition parties, we've reached Alex Marland. He's the Jaroslawski Chair in Trust and Political Leadership at Acadia University. He's also the author of the book No I in Team, Party Loyalty in Canada. Good morning. Oh, good morning there. I think I'm not sure if he can if you can hear us right now there Alex. No, I don't think you can hear us. We're just working on getting things fixed there behind the scenes. But in the meantime, though, a reminder: we'll get back to our conversation with Alex shortly here. But in the meantime, we have him back now. I hear. So hello there, Alex.
Hi there.
Hi, thanks for joining us. So the Prime Minister says the Liberals will work with other parties in collaboration and partnership. And here's a quote, that will solicit all perspectives, unquote, in Parliament. What can opposition parties take from that statement in practical terms?
Yeah, I mean, the question is really what can Canadians take from it? And, any time that there's a big election victory, in this case, the Liberals forming a majority government, out of the slivers of a minority government, they say all these things. They say we're going to work with others, we're going to listen to others. But isn't that the whole point of a majority government, that you don't have to, that you can just move forward and advance your agenda? So I think that's exactly what's going to happen. The Liberals are going to say, we have a mandate, we have a party platform that we ran on, and we have things that we need to accomplish. And so this means there are going to be things they move forward on that the opposition parties are not going to like whatsoever. Frankly, there are going to be things that Liberal MPs don't support and yet are going to be expected to go along with the Carney Liberals on it. So, the idea that you're going to work with others, that's something is more realistic when there's a minority government than a majority.
Right, and now that takes away some of the leverage, of course, from the other parties like the Conservatives and Liberals. So let's, or not Liberals, sorry, the NDP. So let's just start with the Conservatives here. So what does this new reality mean for the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre?
Well, it means that they don't need to prop up the Liberals because they can just inherently oppose them the way that opposition parties do, because they know that items are going to move forward regardless of their votes. But it also gives them a little more time to try to figure out what they are doing in this whole policy space. So, for example, Pierre Poilievre's leadership is still something that a lot of people are thinking about and talking about. He has to be himself. And there's a lot more time now. So that means that if there are any Conservative MPs who are worried about getting reelected, they might not feel the same need to cross the floor the way that has happened recently when there was a possible election coming. On the other hand, there's a problem for Poilievre because it now means there's time to replace him. So if the Conservative caucus were to mobilize to oust him, the way they did before to get rid of Aaron O'Toole, this means there is time to have a leadership race, time to build momentum heading into the next election campaign. So Poilievre has to be on his toes.
And let's head over to the NDP here. So its new leader, Avi Lewis, actually said earlier this week that he won't ask one of the 6 members of his party caucus to step aside so that he can run for a seat in the House. So what does the Liberal majority mean for Lewis and the NDP?
Well, I think it's a bit of a blessing for the NDP because they are in need of money, in need of membership, in need of relevance, quite frankly. And so this means that the new leader can go across, and Mr. Lewis can talk across the country. Mr. Lewis can go into, community halls. He can knock on doors. He can fundraise. He can generate memberships and make the party more relevant than they have been. I would go further than that. I think they need to have a big conversation about their identity, and they should also put the name of the party on the table. What is new about the New Democratic Party these days? The name gets reduced to an acronym, which is never good. That acronym doesn't even work in French. Instead of NDP, it's NPD in French. So they need to have a big conversation about their identity versus all the other parties.
And is that going to be an easier conversation to have since, the Liberals have courted a number of people from the right side of the political spectrum and arguably which has moved the party itself a bit to the right? Does the NDP have, more of a stake of the left side of the political spectrum now than maybe they would have a year or two ago?
Yeah, but they're also hamstrung by this, difficulty they have between progressives in urban centers, and then also the people who are in, rural areas who are kind of competing with them. And so what I mean by that is, and what a lot of people are aware of, is there's a lot of conversation about some of the values that people in the NDP have around things around, for example, pronouns. And that being something to really focus on versus talking about cost of living. And so these are things, one is economic, one is more social, and they have to figure out what they are doing. What is their primary offering? What do they want people to think of when they think of the NDP?
And finally here, what are you be watching for from all the parties in this new Liberal majority era?
So I think what we're going to do is see a more normal rhythm of what happens with a majority government. So the Liberals have been under Carney, have been in power for a year. We would normally expect around now, maybe for the next year or 2 years, some difficult, controversial decisions get made. So they are going to be able to move forward those things because they don't have to rely on other parties. And then as we get closer to 2029, all of a sudden really nice things start happening. And there's all sorts of positive policy announcements because they want everybody to like them heading into the election campaign.
Well, Alex, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Alex Marland is the Jaroslawski Chair in Trust and Political Leadership at Acadia University and the author of the book No I in Team, Party Loyalty in Canada. Stay tuned here. Just ahead, U.S. President Donald Trump takes shots at the Pope on social media for his opposition to the war in Iran. We're going to hear from our faith contributor on how Catholics in America are responding to that. But first, though, let's check in with Heather Wells with a look at news headlines.
Good morning. Well, a local developer is trying to make home ownership more affordable in Steinbach. Waldo Neustaedter and Steinbach Credit Union are offering mortgages with down payments of just 1%, and Neustaedter puts up his own money as collateral. We'll hear about it. Mark Carney says plans to expand the Port of Churchill are a top priority. He met yesterday with Manitoba Premier Rob Canoe. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
Thank you very much, Heather. As for the commute, it's been pretty quiet out there. You can give Sierra a call if you do see something. That number to call, 204-788-3093. You're listening to Information Radio. I'm Corey Funk, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa here on CBC Radio 1. We'll be back after World Report.
On the current.
A always BBC closing. Always be closing.
Cross-pollinate. Actionable. Blue sky as a verb. Does that business speak make you cringe or smile? A new study shows that people who love corporate BS are worse at their jobs. That's coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. Global markets are trending up while oil prices are sliding after U.S. President Donald Trump suggested the war in Iran might be nearly over. He made the comments in an interview that aired earlier this morning. He says peace talks could resume in Pakistan over the next 2 days as the effectiveness of the U.S. blockade in the Strait of Hormuz is being brought into question. We get the latest from the CBC's Sasha Petrusik in Jerusalem.
The U.S. military insists its blockade of Iranian ports is holding, a naval noose meant to strangle Iran's economy by keeping it from exporting oil, or at the very least, to force concessions at the bargaining table. Indeed, further negotiations may happen in a matter of days, says U.S. President Donald Trump.
We'll see what happens. I think they want to make a deal very badly.
He talks about the war in the past tense in a previously recorded interview on Fox Business this morning.
I think it's close to over, yeah. I view it as very close to over.
Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian says Iran is not looking for trouble, that it's simply defending itself. Statements from Iran do seem less provocative in the last day or two. It has not reacted militarily to the blockade, despite earlier threats to attack ports in neighboring Gulf states. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance says he left Iranian negotiators with an offer from Trump when talks broke off last weekend.
He wants to make the grand bargain.
An offer Vance suggests would be a step toward normalizing relations between Washington and Tehran. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
And Vice President Vance is also weighing in on Trump's war of words with Pope Leo.
I like that the Pope is an advocate for peace. I think that's certainly one of his roles. On the other hand, how can you say that God is never on the side of those who wield the sword? Was God on the side of the Americans who liberated France from the Nazis? I think it's very, very important for the Pope to be careful when he talks about matters of theology.
Donald Trump lashed out at the Pope again on social media overnight. He said that someone should tell Pope Leo Iran has killed at least 42,000 unarmed protesters in recent months, and he added it is absolutely unacceptable for Iran to ever have a nuclear bomb. Pope Leo has been vocal about his opposition to the U.S.-Israeli war in Iran. He says he does not fear the Trump administration. The fallout from the war in Iran is already being felt by Canadian consumers, and it's likely going to get worse, especially when it comes to the price of groceries. CBC News has confirmed some major Canadian food suppliers are getting ready to implement fuel surcharges. The CBC's Anis Hadari has more.
On paper, prices are higher because freight is higher.
Giancarlo Tremarchi is president of the small Ontario grocery chain Vince's Market. His business is already seeing price increases from suppliers.
Canada is a gigantic country, mass-wise, and a very small population. That is awful when it comes to cost of transport of food because you're moving smaller quantities of food further distances.
I would like to pay. His chain hasn't implemented price increases yet, but anyone buying food across Canada could see them soon. CBC News has obtained letters from suppliers such as Maple Leaf Foods, Tree of Life, Atlas Foods, and Sunrise Farms, warning stores that fuel surcharges are coming.
These costs hit the suppliers immediately. They immediately try to impose the surcharges.
Fraser Johnson is a professor of supply chain management at the Ivey Business School. He says he's not surprised to see these surcharges, but he also says don't expect a cut to fuel taxes to resolve the problem because diesel costs are just too high.
Well, depending upon where you're located in the country, the prices have gone up by 50%. Dropping the price of diesel by 4 or 5 cents a liter really isn't going to be impactful.
As for what consumers can do, Tremarchi over at Vince's Market says buy local.
You know, Italian wine, your Australian lamb, these are going to have big freight implications.
And any freight takes a lot of fuel, which means it takes a lot of money these days.
Insert cash.
Anis Hadari, CBC News, Calgary.
The Canadian Food Inspection Agency is alerting the public to a recall of 7-Eleven sandwiches. It says some subs and wraps have been potentially contaminated by listeria, and while the food may not look or smell spoiled, it can still cause illness. CFIA says the products were distributed in Alberta, British Columbia, and Saskatchewan. Germany is hosting an international donor conference hoping to raise over $1 billion for aid for Sudan. Today, the 3rd anniversary of that country's devastating civil war. The conflict has killed hundreds of thousands of people and forced millions more from their homes. Many have fled to neighboring Central African Republic. Caitlin Kelly is at the border town of Birao and spoke to some of those refugees.
The journey from Nyala, Darfur, was a path between life and death, recalls Naima Mohammed. At the Birao registration point in the Central African Republic, she describes the merciless 8-day journey she endured, marked by armed men and robbers. Since April 2023, more than 14 million people have been displaced by Sudan's brutal war, including more than 4.4 million who fled to neighbouring countries like the Central African Republic. Korsi refugee camp now hosts more than 20,000. Like Hikma, who fled Nyala after her sister was killed in 2023. Pleading to God and the UN for help so she can return home, she describes a fractured country. The problem has become internal, she says. In one home, you find the father is a soldier and the sons are RSF. At the camp's water point, women queue for scarce drinking water. Refugees say the essentials were more available earlier on in the war. Gloria Ramazani from the UN Refugee Agency says aid cuts have worsened the war's impacts.
As of today, we are only 11% funded, so leaving 89% of gap that need to be filled to be able to provide humanitarian response, but also sustainable responses.
With fighting ongoing across Sudan and rising drone strikes, civilians face growing danger, so refugees here remain in limbo, with little prospect of returning home. Caitlin Kelly for CBC News, Birao, Central African Republic.
American live streamer Johnny Somali is sentenced to 6 months in a South Korean prison. The 25-year-old self-professed internet troll caused outrage back in 2024 by filming himself kissing a statue commemorating Korean women forced into sexual slavery by occupying Japanese forces before and during the Second World War. South Korean authorities charged him with the offense of public nuisance and distributing sexual deepfakes. They also barred him from leaving the country. Johnny Somali has apologized. He says he was not aware of the significance of the statue. A team of Canadian Rangers is coming off a major Arctic endurance test, 52 days patrolling the edge of the Northwest Passage. As the CBC's Murray Brewster tells us, the mission part of an endurance test and also a high-tech proving ground.
So we just did 5,200 kilometers in the coldest winter that anyone remembers.
Lieutenant Colonel Travis Haynes, commander of the 1st Canadian Ranger Patrol Group.
He and 9 other soldiers recently completed a presence patrol, testing cutting-edge surveillance technology against real-world conditions.
But to put it in like practical terms, everything freezes, let alone your hands. All comms devices are always made for people without like gloves on.
Increasing surveillance across the vast northern frontier is one of the military and the federal government's major preoccupations. The Rangers are often called the country's eyes and ears in the north, but getting what they see and hear in real time into the hands of commanders and decision makers has long been a challenge.
There's no satellite signal, there's no telecom operating up there. You're literally in a completely communications desert.
Elliot Pence is the CEO of Dominion Dynamics, which has developed a software system that pairs with military communications gear and allows the Rangers to communicate and share information among themselves and pass it along instantaneously when there's a downlink available.
Over the last 60 days, what we've created is the ability to push this information up into a web app, a common operating picture, that allows the strategic command to understand and essentially track and trace and follow along.
Pence says it's Canadian technology, which could be useful in the deserts or the jungle or other far-flung locations. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
And finally, the rapper formerly known as Kanye West is postponing his upcoming show in the French city of Marseille, now known as Ye. He made the decision a week after he was banned from entering the UK for making anti-Semitic remarks. The rapper released a song called Heil Hitler and advertised a swastika T-shirt on his website last year. French authorities had said they were considering ways to ban him from performing. Ye says he is committed to making amends, but he knows that it will take time to understand the sincerity of that commitment. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page. We get some spring-like weather today, but then it gets a little more wintry. We got a special weather statement. We'll get the details on that coming up shortly here. Also, congrats to everyone who managed to book campsites that just opened. I managed to book a campsite. I had over 7,000 people ahead of me in line, but it only took about 5 minutes or so. So hopefully if you're waiting in line, good luck to you this morning. Coming up this hour on this show, Manitoba has already signed on to Canada's universal $10 a day childcare system. So why are parents in Manitoba still struggling to find spaces? We're going to speak with a leading voice on childcare policy. Also, there's a lot of medical science being done on the Artemis 2 mission, and our own space nerd and medical doctor, Raj Bardwaj, will be in to talk about some of that. Also, first up here on the show, U.S. President Donald Trump has taken lots of shots at the Pope on social media for his opposition to the war in Iran. We're going to hear from our faith contributor on how Catholics in America are responding to the president's comments towards the Pope. All that coming up here on Information Radio. But right now, though, let's check in with Heather Wells with a look at news headlines.
Good morning. Well, evacuations from Peguis First Nation are likely. That word yesterday from Infrastructure Minister Lisa Naylor, as Peguis works frantically to protect homes and infrastructure from another spring flood. They have a week to protect more than 200 homes, and the province says the Fisher River will likely start cresting April 23rd. A First Nation is asking Manitoba to remove a gas main from its land. The line will connect 2 stretches of a hydro pipeline project the province greenlit just last month. Roseau River councillor Evan Roberts says the community faces dangers like pipeline ruptures while not getting any benefits from this project. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That's Heather Wells at your CBC News desk. Well, as mentioned, there's a special weather statement for southern Manitoba as well as a snowfall warning up north, despite the fact we actually have a lovely day ahead. Abby is here to break it down.
I'm just going to say it one more time. Soak up that one last day of the pleasant spring sunshine before that sharp shift swings in tomorrow. While the northern half of the province still locked in those winter-like grip. We have a special statement in effect for all of southern Manitoba. This includes Winnipeg all the way spreading towards Dauphin this morning. While today will be mild, a late late season storm will be arriving overnight. This will be bringing a high risk of freezing rain, and even at some point we might notice ice pellets in some areas, particularly along the Trans-Canada Highway and through the Red River Valley. While in the northern part of the province, we have a snowfall warning for regions around the Pa and Flin Flon and all east towards the Ontario border, where we're anticipating up to 20 centimeters of snow expected to cause challenging travel conditions today for folks in that part of the province. But let's deal with today. Today's forecast for Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region is going to be bringing mainly sunny skies. We're already seeing the sunshine outside, along with windy conditions. Currently 2 degrees at the Forks and at the airport, but we're expecting a high of 18 degrees today before deep to about -5, and then those freezing rain will be arriving tonight. Thursday stays cloudy. Thursday only creeps to about 1 degree across the southern region. Similar temperatures we're seeing most areas hovering between 0 and 2 degrees, enjoying some sunshine spreading from Port de la Prairie all the way to Dauphin this morning. Some areas will get to 20 before we see a sharp freeze arrive tonight as the storm rolls in, dropping temperatures to about -5 in most of the regions. Up north, it's still pretty harsh out there. We're looking at temperatures close to the wind chill feels like -38 as you travel towards Churchill this morning. To Dula Lake, -25. Winnipeg, we are at 2 degrees right now.
Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
That's Abby Adeyemi, keeping an eye on our ever-changing weather here in the province. And Sierra Sanders, what's going on with the commute?
Not too much, Corey. The commuter line has been pretty quiet so far in the show today. So that, to me, sounds like things are moving along out there on your morning commute. But if that's not the case and there is something that is getting in your way, whether you are here in the city or anywhere else in the province, you can give me a call. The number is 204-788-3093.
Well, this weekend, Pope Leo criticized the U.S. war in Iran, saying the Vatican's appeals for peace and reconciliation are rooted in the gospel. President Trump responded on social media saying, in part, quote, Leo should get his act together as Pope, use common sense, stop catering to the radical left, and focus on being a great Pope, not a politician. It's hurting him very badly, and more importantly, it's hurting the Catholic Church. Unquote. Trump also said the only reason Leo was elected Pope was to curry favor with his administration. And here to talk about this is our faith contributor, John Longhurst. Good morning.
Good morning.
So how are American Catholics responding to Trump's comments about the Pope?
Well, Catholic leaders in the U.S. were quick to express their disappointment with the president. They called his statement entirely inappropriate and disrespectful. And there were many calls for Trump to apologize, but so far it doesn't seem like he's been doing that.
So it is unusual for a U.S. president to get into a war of words like this with the Pope, is it? Or not?
Yes, absolutely. It's very, very unusual. It's not uncommon for popes to criticize other countries' policies, including the United States. But it's very unusual for this kind of dialogue to take place. For example, in 2003, Pope John Paul II, he opposed the U.S. war in Iraq. And several popes have been critical of the U.S. nuclear arms buildup. And Pope Francis was against U.S. immigration policies. But those critiques were diplomatic, they were restrained, they were never personal. What's happened now with President Trump is something that's been described as unprecedented, what with his personal insults towards Pope Leo.
And Pope Leo, it's not like he's just doing this on his own from the top. Other Catholic leaders are criticizing the Trump administration too, right?
Oh, exactly, yes. And that includes right in the United States. Critiques are coming from senior leaders in the American Roman Catholic Church. And that includes 3 cardinals who, in March, issued a joint statement warning that American foreign policy is causing immense suffering around the world through things like the war in Iran and the cuts to foreign aid. They were also critical of Trump's immigration and mass deportation policies. And then there was a Mass for Peace recently where one of the cardinals called for American Catholics to stand up against the war in Iran. And he said they should say, not in our name and not at this moment and not with our country.
And what about the average Catholic in the States? Is Trump's attack on the Pope going to change how they vote?
Well, that is a big question, and right now it's too early to tell. What we do know is that 56% of Roman Catholics in the United States voted for Donald Trump in 2024. Recent polling suggests they might be divided, with many white Catholics still supporting Trump because of his stance against abortion and his immigration policies. But others, especially younger Catholics, they're starting to move away, including over the war in Iran. So what we need is more time to see what shifts and how Trump's treatment of the Pope might make a difference. What people are saying, though, is this: given that Trump needs all the help he can get in the midterm elections, why would he go off on Pope Leo and potentially anger such a large part of his support base? That doesn't make any sense at all.
And all this, of course, taking place at a time when we actually seem to be hearing even more talk about religion mixing with politics in the U.S. too, right?
Oh, exactly. Religion and politics have often been mixed in the United States, but this seems to be like an extreme time. For example, it's common for American leaders to criticize some countries like Iran for having theocratic governments. By that, they mean governments that are ruled by religious ideology rather than civil law. But when you look at the United States today, you begin to wonder, maybe it's happening right there too, because you think about the war. The Trump administration is consistently portraying it as something that's divinely appointed, that God wants them to do these kinds of things against Iran. It's divinely sanctioned, they say. They invoke God's presence, and they feel certain that God is on the side of their military. And then you have Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth praying for victory over Iran in the name of Jesus. And then, of course, on the weekend, there was that post. And when I say that post from Trump, everybody knows what post I mean. The post where he portrayed himself as Jesus healing the sick. Well, he deleted that post after intense criticism, including from evangelicals, another huge part of his support base, who called it blasphemous.
Right. And interesting is that mix is coming from more Protestant perspective than Catholic, which I think maybe speaks to a little bit of why there's that tension between the Trump and the Pope, perhaps. Any final thoughts on this at all?
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts. First of all, J.D. Vance earlier this week, he converted to Catholicism. He said this week that the Pope should stick to, quote, matters of morality. Well, I don't know what J.D. Vance was taught when he was converting to Catholicism, but that's exactly what the Pope was doing when he spoke against war and for peace. It's pretty much the job description. So J.D. Vance, maybe he wasn't paying attention during those classes. But then, secondly, it's just the bigger question of when war is declared and what happens to religion. And it's not uncommon then for religion to be conscripted by governments, to be used by governments to justify their actions like this war against Iran. It happened in Russia. It happened in Iran right now. It happened in Israel. And it's happening now in the United States. Historically, no long-term good ever comes out of this for religion when governments conscript it for its own purposes. Religious people just end up being used by governments to justify things that lead to suffering and pain around the world. And it can cause non-religious people to look at religion and say, well, if that's what it is, count me out. So when we think about the old adage that truth is the first casualty of war, sometimes I wonder in this regard whether religion might be the second.
Well, John, thanks for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
That's John Longhurst, our faith contributor. Well, time now, 7:22, and yes, it is going to be a beautiful spring day and then get kind of wintry after that. And if you need to start thinking about what you might want to do this summer, I know actually I did, like I mentioned earlier, I booked some campsites. Felt pretty good to start dreaming about that kind of stuff. Also this summer, August 15th, is the Hanover Ag Fair, and headlining that event is Manitoba's own Katie St. Germain. And here she is now with her track, Grow.
Some days you feel like a weed, Some days you feel like a rose, one day they're falling at your feet. Next thing you know, you're standing in their shadow. That's how it goes. Sometimes you're basking in the sun, sometimes you're buried in the dirt. Just when you think you're coming up, somebody gets there first. Yeah, I know. But you grow, yeah, you're getting stronger through those highs and lows. Sometimes goodbye makes room for hello, and it happens so damn slow that you don't even notice. But in those moments, you grow, you grow. Living under a microscope, so hard on yourself, you're always judging. You're always looking way too close. You can't see the beauty of becoming. No, you don't. But you grow. Yeah, you're getting stronger through those highs and lows. Sometimes goodbye makes room for hello, and it happens so damn slow that you don't even notice. But in those moments, you grow. You grow. You grow. Always cutting yourself down, dragging yourself through the mud. And the funny thing is, if you finally let it all go, that's when you grow. Yeah, you're getting stronger through those highs and lows. Sometimes goodbye makes room for hello, and it happens so damn slow that you don't even notice. But in those moments, you grow.
Let's Grow by Niverville native Katie St. Germain. You can catch her live this summer when she headlines the Hanover Ag Fair on August 15th. Well, 7:25 right now, and Scott Regehr is in with a look at morning sports. Hello.
Hey, Corey.
So let's start on the ice where the Jets season is reaching its end.
Yeah, what did the poet T.S. Eliot say? This is the way a hockey season ends. Not with a bang, but a whimper. Right? Did he say that about the NHL?
No, I think that was exactly it. You're right.
Thank you. Yeah. So last night in Utah against the playoff-bound Mammoth, I think I'd be saying that right now, but there you are. The Mammoth got out to a 4-1 lead. They had double the number of shots that the Jets did. Kudos to Winnipeg. They made a spirited effort. They came within a goal before Utah eventually won it. Winger Kyle Cotter, who scored, says the pushback comes down to self-respect within the locker room.
Yeah, well, there's still a lot of pride in there, and every time you put on the uniform, you gotta, respect the game out there and your teammates and fight for each other. We had to give pushback, and it wasn't enough though. So, never happy with the loss.
Yeah, kind of going through the message track there a little bit. Kyle Connor, the season about to come to an end. This was the penultimate game. Winnipeg will play its final contest tomorrow, hosting the San Jose Sharks. And by the way, Rick Bowness, the former coach for the Jets, had a bit of a meltdown. He's now heading up the Columbus Blue Jackets, or at least he was this season, and their end of the season conference was, well, if you haven't seen it, you might want to check it out. It'll bring back some memories, I think.
Okay, looking forward to that. He was always never known to pull punches, that's for sure.
No, you're not left wondering what he's trying to get across.
No, not at all. Well, next up here, over to baseball, where the Blue Jays played their identity last night.
They did play to their identity, forged while nearly winning the World Series last season, of course. A persona built on resilience, finding a way to win regardless of circumstance. And these circumstances, Corey, were not great in Milwaukee last night. Toronto needed to use 5 of their relief pitchers. They had to use every single position player on their roster, and ultimately needed to come back twice before prevailing against the Brewers. The deciding hit was a double by Miles Straw in extra innings, after Milwaukee intentionally walked the previous batter just to get to Straw. It was one of those how do you like them apples moments that we saw so many of last year. Here's the manager, John Schneider.
Everyone knows to be ready. Heine being ready, Miles, Schneid, Sosa, first day here. A little bit of everything. Used everybody and just made enough plays, took enough swings. Miles likes those situations too. I get where you walk Sanch, obviously, but Miles isn't going to back down, and neither is Schneid, neither are any of these guys. So that was a good Blue Jay win right there.
Now the Jays have to just keep stringing some of those wins together because they're still below 500. They're in second to last place in their division. Injuries do have something to do with that, Corey. Between the ailments to players like George Springer, Shane Bieber, and Cody Ponce, Toronto has more salary tied up on the injury list than teams like the Marlins and Guardians spend on their entire organization. No matter what's a little more adversity for a Jays club that's already been through so much of it. Expect more tonight. They're back in Milwaukee.
Well, long season ahead, so we'll have to see. And in soccer, Canada's women's team dealt with its own adversity.
It did during a match against South Korea. Less than half an hour in, Corey, Jade Rose was shown a straight red card for a tackle that denied a Korean player a breakaway. Replays show, though, the tackle was completely clean, although the ref didn't see it that way. And so Canada continued a player short for most of the match, and it didn't matter. Defender Vanessa Gilles headed home 2 goals in the second half. Final score, Canada 3, South Korea 1. Here is Gilles.
It was a very questionable call. I think personally Jade Rose's tackle was a very good tackle, so hard to see her get that red card. Listen, these are things we're going to face in tournaments possibly, so as hard as it was to see us go a man down, it was also nice to get the experience as well leading into a tournament.
Yeah, and the big tournament's coming up in November where Canada tries to qualify for the next World Cup and Olympics in one fell swoop.
Well, thank you very much, Scott.
You betcha.
That is Scott Regier with your morning sports. Stay tuned here on Information Radio. Coming up this next half hour, a national childcare advocacy organization is going to break down what's working, what's not when it comes to the rollout of a universal $10 a day childcare program here in Manitoba. That's coming up after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is 2 degrees, and Winnipeg is going to feel real spring today, and then maybe back kind of feeling like winter tomorrow. But for today, sunny, windy, a high of 18. The Manitoba government says it's all hands on deck in Peguis First Nation. That community north of Winnipeg is pulling out all the stops to protect homes and infrastructure from spring floods. Even so, Infrastructure Minister Lisa Naylor says people will likely have to leave.
It's very likely with some significant flooding that despite all this preparation, there will still be evacuations because the flooding could cut off the road. If we're cutting off the road to community, it's not safe to be there. There's not medical care access. Support can't get in and out.
And time is running out. Just a week to protect more than 200 homes. The province says the Fisher River will likely start cresting April 23rd. Chief Stan Bird says it is a massive undertaking.
We have crews doing the conventional sandbagging. We're using super sandbags. We moved to the clay dikes. This will offer the higher level flood protection.
Bird says the province has been helping, but there is still a lot of work to do. A First Nation is asking Manitoba to remove a gas main from its land. That line will connect 2 stretches of a hydro pipeline project the province greenlit just last month. Roseau River Councillor Evan Roberts says the community faces dangers like pipeline ruptures while not getting any benefits from the project.
It's not tied into our homes. It doesn't heat our homes. It doesn't provide any kind of energy for our community. It just passes through and then goes on to service neighboring communities in the region.
The community of Roseau sent a letter threatening potential legal action. Roberts says hydro workers entering Roseau will be told to leave. The province and Manitoba Hydro say they are looking into the matter but can't comment at this time. A new housing development in Steinbach is helping people become homeowners. A local developer and Steinbach Credit Union have teamed up to offer hundreds of mortgages down payments at just 1%. Waldo Neustaedter puts up his own money as collateral. Maya Bunk is a new homeowner who says she could never own a home without this program.
My husband and I got married. We lived with our parents for the first 6 months to save up to buy a home. And then when it came down to it and we started looking, it was almost impossible for us. So this was the only thing we could do at the time.
This week, another similar development is going up in nearby Mitchell. More than 200 single-family homes, duplexes, and townhomes will soon be available for those having trouble breaking into the housing market. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump's claiming the war in Iran is nearly over, and as soon as it is, he says fuel prices will drop. Trump adds peace talks could resume in Pakistan over the next couple of days, and the effectiveness of the U.S. blockade in the Strait of Hormuz is being brought into question. Now, Iran is threatening to block an alternate shipping route, the Red Sea, if the U.S. blockade of Hormuz continues. That is State TV reading the announcement. Iran's military calling the American action a threat to the current ceasefire, a warning that Iran would also cut off all shipping going in and out of the Gulf of Oman and the Persian Gulf. You can hear more on this story as it develops, as well as other national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Mark Carney says plans to expand the Port of Churchill are a top priority. The Prime Minister making that comment before meeting with Manitoba Premier Rob Canoe yesterday in Ottawa. Canoe says there is big potential for a trade corridor to Churchill, which would involve improvements to the port, rail access, and other infrastructure. The plan was among several transformative quote-unquote, projects shortlisted by the federal government last year. After yesterday's meeting, Canoe says he and Carney have agreed to explore options to increase the shipment of critical minerals from the port. Well, another loss for the Winnipeg Jets in their last road game of the season.
Rousseau with a drive, and he scores!
Isaac Rosin in the third period on TSN as the Jets fall to the Utah Mammoth 5-3. Kyle Connor also scoring his 39th goal of the season. Connor says these final games of the season are a good time for new young players to see some ice time.
It can always be tough to come in a situation like that, but I thought everybody's been great. They've been helping us, so it's good to have them.
The Jets' final game of the season is tomorrow night here at Canada Life Centre hosting the San Jose Sharks. It is also Fan Appreciation Night. You can find the latest news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That's Heather Wells at your CBC News desk.
This is going to be bringing high risk of freezing rain, and some areas might even get ice pellets. So be prepared for that. And you will track this along the Trans-Canada Highway through the Red River Valley region overnight into tomorrow. So we have a system to watch out for overnight. And of course, your Thursday commute would be something you need to plan ahead. In the north, we have a snowfall warning for the Flin Flon and towards the Ontario border, east towards the Ontario border, where we're tracking up to 20 centimeters of snow. The snow is already coming down in that part of the province and is expected to also impact travel conditions today. So take that into consideration. For Winnipeg right now, we're enjoying some sunny conditions along with, you will notice the winds outside. Current temperatures around 2 degrees. We will get to a high of 18 today before we drop to that -5, and the freezing rain will be arriving tonight. Thursday stays cloudy. We get to +1 across the southern regions. We're currently seeing temperatures hover between 0 to 2 degrees with sunny skies in most of the areas. We're talking about in the Pembina Valley region, Morden, Winkler, Alton, and Morris, all the way down to Port La Prairie. We're seeing 2 degrees there. That part of the province, Corey, will touch 20 degrees today. In the Westman region, Brandon towards Nipawin, we're looking at the cloudy skies, 0 there this time, warming up to 16. Dauphin towards Russell, we're seeing misty conditions there, 0 also. You warm up to 12. Gimli getting some kind of cloudy conditions, 0, warming up to 14. While up north, where we'll be noticing that heavy snow sweeping some areas, already getting the dump. Looking at temperatures between -10 and -26, -10 around the Par. Heavy heavy snow will be dumping in that part of the province for sure. Thompson, Lily, Gillam, we're seeing light snow between -14 and -20, highs around -10. And Tuduli Lake, -26 with sunshine at this time, and -23 in Churchill with some sunshine. Wind chill feels like -36. So it's still mild down south, while that heavy northern snow is already making its appearance. For the city, we're expecting a sunny sky, a windy high of 18 today. Current temperature is 2 degrees.
Thank you very much. Every year it catches me off guard how long winters can last here in Manitoba. True. But still lovely, and summer is just around the corner. Sierra Sanders, what's going on with the commute?
Yeah, I just got a call from Tony. Northbound Waverly at Clarence. There's a stalled street sweeper in the curb lane there. So you want to keep an eye out for that if that is on your commute. I know that might sneak up on you, and I know it can get a little bit backed up there. So you want to keep that in mind there. Northbound Waverly at Clarence. There's a stalled street sweeper in the curb lane. But be like Tony. If there is something that's getting in your way and you want to let me know about it, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number is 204-788-3093.
Don't want to get in a dust up with a street sweeper.
No, we need them.
Thank you very much, Sierra. That's Sierra Sanders, our studio director, keeping an eye on your commute. Well, I think everyone's still a bit of a buzz after the Artemis 2 mission last week, and people across the planet were watching when it splashed down on Friday, including our regular medical contributor and self-identified space nerd, Dr. Raj Bardwaj. And he joins us to talk about how the medical research done in space will one day help people back on Earth. Good morning.
Hi, Corey.
So what was going through your mind while you were watching the Orion spacecraft come back to Earth?
Yeah, the biggest feeling I had was, wow, like science is so awesome, right? The fact that we could launch 4 people into space, have them go around the moon and then land safely again. And they were doing way more than sightseeing, right? They were doing so much science. It was so cool. But I have to admit, when I was actually watching it come down through the atmosphere and the first set of parachutes let go and it plummeted, oh my gosh, so did my heart. I was don't do that to me, NASA.
Yep. I know. I'm sure there's some the age of the Challenger generation.
Oh, yeah,
probably
I saw that
comes
live.
back. Oh, really? See,
Yeah.
I bet you some of that comes back. So yeah,
For sure.
If we're looking at the impact on the humans traveling to space, what's the difference between the Artemis 2 mission that was only 10 days long and the International Space Station where people go to space for months at a time there?
Yeah, I was thinking that too. What's the big deal, right? It's only 10 days. But the big deal is the distance from Earth and the size of the ship. So the International Space Station, it's only about 400 kilometers up from the surface of the Earth. At its furthest, the Artemis 2 mission was more than 400,000 kilometers away. And because the ISS is in low Earth orbit, it's mostly protected from space radiation by Earth's magnetic field. But that field does not go all the way to the moon. Right? So the Artemis crew didn't have that protection the whole time. And then the second difference is the size of the ship. The ISS is about the size of a 6-bedroom house with a gym and 2 bathrooms. And, the Artemis 2 spacecraft, it was about the size of a small studio apartment being shared by 4 people, right? And with only one sometimes working toilet. So
Right.
those are the big 2 differences. But, through the years, NASA has had some pretty big brains come up with a list of the 5 biggest hazards of human space flight. So that space radiation is the biggest one, but then the isolation, including all the psychological stress that comes with having to function in that small space, but then also do science and do things that keep you alive. And then the distance from Earth is a big one because the further you get, the more you have to bring with you. And you have to bring everything with you, your water, your food, your medical supplies, the know-how on how to use them. Plus, there's, the further you get, there's more lag time for communication, right? And then gravity fields is another one because in microgravity, everything changes, right? Your bones, your muscles, your heart, like we heard, your balance, your vision, even your immune system. And then the last thing is just the closed environment. So like the noise, for example, from the life support machinery, you can't turn that off. The carbon dioxide levels that have to be monitored and scrubbed, even the microbiome that starts to grow in the ship. So there's a lot of hazards.
There is lots of science happening, though, too. Medical science in particular. We actually had a doctor on one of our shows a little while back. He talked about the heart in space. He's a researcher here in Winnipeg, and how it actually turns into the shape of a soccer ball, essentially, while you're in space. It's just wild. What other kind of medical science is NASA doing on this mission?
Yeah, so three big things. NASA loves its acronyms, so they've got two sort of acronyms that they're using. So one is Archer and one is Avatar. So Archer stands for Artemis Research for Crew Health and Readiness. So imagine the last time we sent people to the moon was 1972. There was no Fitbit, there was no Apple Watch back then, obviously. NASA is using that sort of technology, though, now to monitor the astronauts super closely. So they're using, under this Archer research project, they're basically monitoring, how the astronauts move in zero G, how well they sleep, how much they sleep, their radiation exposure, their blood oxygen levels, all sorts of things that they could monitor way better and way more closely now than they could back in the 70s. The other one is called Avatar. Avatar stands for a Virtual Astronaut Tissue Analog Response. So with Avatar, what they're doing is they're taking samples of the astronaut's blood and they're keeping it alive by implanting it into what they're calling organ chip technology. So these little organ chips have astronauts' blood in them. And then they take some of the organ chips up to space and leave some on Earth. And they're studying basically how each organ responds to the stresses of space. And then the third big medical thing that they're doing is they're studying the immune system in deep space by doing blood and saliva samples. And there's already evidence from the ISS astronauts that viruses that are dormant inside us, like chickenpox and herpes virus and stuff, might be more likely to reactivate in space. So, we need to learn more about that and why that's happening.
Wow. And how might the organ chip research help with future space missions?
Right. So apart from looking at just blood cells, the organ chips can be grown from astronauts' stem cells and then produce different types of human tissue. So they could look at brain cells on one chip, or heart cells, or liver cells, or immune system cells, or whatever. And then they could expose one set of organ chips to different space environments and then keep the other set on Earth as a control. But remember that each set of Avatar cells is grown from a particular astronaut. So when NASA chooses who's going to land on the moon as part of the Artemis 4 mission, they can send those people's cells ahead of time into space on these organ chips. And then same goes for when we send people to Mars, right? We can say, okay, you guys are on the Mars team. We're going to take your blood, send it up on a Mars probe, have it fly around Mars, come back, and then see how things went with your organs, basically. And then depending on what they find, they can adjust the mission or adjust the radiation shielding or the medical supplies on board or whatever to make it a safer trip for those particular people.
Wow. And NASA also says that this research could help how doctors treat their patients here on Earth. So how does that work?
Yeah, so there's actually a proven track record of advances that are made for space missions that ultimately become standard back on the ground. So in the medical field, one of the coolest ones is those little ear thermometers. When you go to the doctor and we stick something in your ear, push the button and get your temperature. Those ear thermometers are using astronomy technology to measure the amount of energy emitted by your eardrum and then translating that into a core body temp. So I love that. I mean, I love the idea that every time I stick one of those, I'm doing a little bit of space science. So there's point of care ultrasound, which we've talked about before. That's becoming more widely used in medicine on Earth because these point of care ultrasound devices are becoming smaller and better. And they're becoming smaller and better, partly because NASA needed them to be smaller and better because they take them on space missions. So, same sort of thing. With Avatar, NASA wants to research ways to prevent or treat radiation exposure in space. So imagine when they develop techniques or medications to do that, those things could be used on Earth on people who have to have radiation therapy for cancer treatment, for example. No. And then same goes for drug development or learning more about the interaction between your immune system and different germs overall, not just in space, right? So that's the cool thing. As this organ chip technology gets better and cheaper, we'll end up using it more on Earth. We're going to develop more precise, more personalized treatments for our patients here on Earth, not just the people who go up into space. And I think that's the really cool thing is that, even though a lot of this people think, well, yeah, but that's only, a few dozen people who've ever gone to space. It's like, yeah, but it benefits all of us.
Well, fascinating. I'm sure as the space missions go on, we'll see what comes of that too. Really, really great to have you on, Dr. Bardwaj.
Great. Thanks, Corey.
That's host Dr. Raj Bardwaj.
The PWHL is back for the third season of heart-stopping women's hockey. And this season, there are two new teams looking to make their mark on the ice. The Seattle Torrent and Vancouver Golden Eyes. When the world's best women's hockey players face off, anything can happen. Will the Minnesota Frost achieve a three-peat? Will a new team take home the trophy? There's only one way to find out. Watch the PWHL for free on CBC Gem.
7:48 right now, and still to come here on Information Radio. Home ownership can feel out of reach for many Canadians, especially young people, newcomers. Well, after 8 o'clock, we're going to head to Steinbach, where a developer, a builder, and a credit union have teamed up to offer mortgages for just 1% down. You've been hearing that story in the news. Our reporter, Chris Garrow, is going to come join us to tell the in-depth version of that story coming up shortly. Also, keep in mind there is a weather statement in effect for southern Manitoba and a snowfall warning for northern Manitoba. The weather statement says that essentially, despite this warm weather we have right now, it's going to be plummeting below zero to about -5 overnight here. And that means a late kind of spring winter-like storm could come and bring about 4 to 8 centimeters of snow / maybe even freezing rain overnight. So tomorrow morning this time, we could see some slippery conditions out there on the highways. And up north right now, snowfall warning in effect for the Pas Flin Flon area, which could bring as much as 20 centimeters of snow. Right now, though, Canada is still working to roll out its universal $10 a day childcare system. But our next guest says progress on increasing the number of affordable spaces has been moving slower than many families need, including here in Manitoba. Morna Ballantyne is the executive director of Childcare Now, Canada's national childcare advocacy organization, and she'll be hosting a talk at an event in Winnipeg tonight, and she joins us now via Zoom. Good morning.
Good morning.
So let's just start with the positive, of what's been going right so far before we kind of talk about what still needs to happen. So what has been going well so far with Canada's $10 a day childcare rollout?
Well, starting in 2021, when the federal government announced a huge public investment in early learning and childcare, we've had governments paying a lot more attention to the problem of the lack of available, affordable, high-quality early learning and childcare programs. So what's really been fantastic is the amount of attention that's been paid to this issue. Because of the large federal investment and because of funding agreements that were reached between the federal government and each provincial and each territorial government, we've seen significant improvements in the provision of early learning and childcare and in the supply. So we have seen across the country a growth of the sector. Those who work in the sector have received, because of this public investment, some significant improvements in their compensation and working conditions, and that has improved retention rates of qualified staff. And probably the most visible positive impact of this large public investment is that parent fees for licensed childcare have dropped dramatically across the country. And in 6 jurisdictions across Canada, including Manitoba, the federal government's target of bringing down fees to an average of $10 a day has been reached or exceeded. So, there's been big progress. And of course, families have benefited from that investment. But early learning and childcare programs have also really benefited. I have to remember that before the introduction of this program, we went through a global pandemic, which really devastated the early learning and childcare sector. Programs were closed, staff had been laid off, and the sector was really struggling to get on its feet. So when we look at the sector today, we are in much, much better shape.
So we've come a long way, obviously, but there's still, as you would say, probably a long way to go as well. So what do you think is not working right now, and what needs to be improved to make sure it's successful for everyone?
The biggest challenge is exactly that, is making sure that there is available high quality licensed childcare for everybody who needs it and wants it. And we are a long way from that. There is a huge gap between the demand for licensed childcare and the supply. Now, some jurisdictions, the gap has been narrowed. PEI, for example, and also in Quebec. There's enough regulated or licensed childcare for about half the child population for the children between the ages of 0 and 12. In a province like Manitoba, however, the availability of licensed childcare is much less, and there's enough of regulated childcare for just over 20% of children 0 to 12. So that means a lot of families are going without the childcare that they need that the children need, because children, of course, need high quality, safe spaces and programs that will tend to their healthy development.
Yeah.
But of course, parents need childcare to be able to participate fully in the paid labor force.
But so then, what are PEI in Quebec doing that Manitoba isn't, in your opinion, to meet the demand?
Sorry, what's the problem in Manitoba as well as other places?
Or like you said, there are other places where they have met the amount of, if I heard correctly, have met the amount of the demand for childcare spaces, but Manitoba hasn't. So what are other places doing that have met that demand that Manitoba hasn't?
Yeah, well, I should just say that nowhere in Canada has is there sufficient licensed childcare. But some are doing better. In some provinces, provincial governments are doing better. The big problem in Manitoba and across the country is that even though there has been a large public investment, more than we've ever seen in Canada's history, and that means government funding for programs, we haven't seen sufficient government intervention, and we haven't seen governments take enough responsibility for actually putting in place more licensed programs. So governments are still relying on the sector itself to be able to create the new spaces. And the sector itself is pretty busy trying to keep existing programs operating. They don't have the capacity to be able to look for how to increase the number of spaces. They don't have the capacity to go find land, to supervise construction, and then also to make sure that there are enough qualified early childhood educators to staff the new centers. That has to be a government responsibility. And so governments, including the government in Manitoba, have to engage much more in the planning of the growth of the system, and they have to be able to put in place the supports for the growth. So that means more government funding, and it also means governments looking for where childcare is needed and where it can be put in place efficiently and cost effectively. So, for example, more childcare in schools. If we're building more more affordable housing in the country, and there's a big initiative and concern about that, let's make sure that childcare is part of those housing developments. Municipalities have to be involved for making sure that the zoning is right for childcare centers to be put in place. So we need an all-out government effort, much greater than what we've seen in the last 5 years.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Morna, thank you for your time this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Morna Ballantyne is the Executive Director of Childcare Now. She'll be speaking tonight at the Childcare Coalition of Manitoba's annual general meeting. The event is open to the public, and you can learn more at childcaremanitoba.org. 7:57 right now, and still to come here, how much did you have to put down on your first home, if in fact you do own a home? What if I told you some new homeowners in Steinbach are getting mortgages for new homes with just 1% down? That's coming up after 8 o'clock. But right now, though, let's check in with Heather Wells with a look at news headlines.
Good morning. Well, time is running out to protect Peguis First Nation from spring flooding. Infrastructure Minister Lisa Naylor says all the preparations may not be enough. She says despite it being all the preparations going on, she says if flooding cuts off the road, evacuations are likely. So we'll hear the latest from her. And a First Nation is asking Manitoba to remove a gas main from its land. That line will connect two stretches of hydro pipeline project the province greenlit last month. Roseau River Councillor Evan Roberts says the community faces dangers like pipeline ruptures while not getting any benefits from the project. More news coming up at 8:30.
Thank you very much, Heather. Traffic so far moving along nicely. Not too many major issues out there. But if you do see something, you can give us a call, 204-788-3093. Though tomorrow this time might be a little more slippery out there. Special weather statement in effect for southern Manitoba that could bring freezing rain overnight to much of the southern part of the province. We'll have updates for you on that after 8 o'clock. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcusa. Stay tuned. This is Information Radio. We'll be back after World Report.
26. 5 perceptive panelists, 5 blockbuster books, 4 days of smart and sassy deliberation and debate. But there can only be one winner. Ali Hassan hosts Canada's favorite book battle, Canada Reads 2026, one book to build bridges. All this week on radio, TV, the Listen app, and on CBC Gem. For more, go to cbcbooks.ca. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Cross-pollinate. Actionable, blue sky as a verb. Does that business speak make you cringe or smile? A new study shows that people who love corporate BS are worse at their jobs. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. U.S. President Donald Trump says the war in Iran is nearly over. And as soon as it is, he says fuel prices will drop.
I think oil will be down to the levels it was. You know, they said, I expect oil to be high at the midterms. I don't expect that. When this is over, I think the stock market is going to boom.
Trump also says peace talks could resume in Pakistan over the next 2 days. This as the effectiveness of the U.S. blockade in the Strait of Hormuz is brought into question. We get the latest from the CBC's Sasha Petrusik in Jerusalem.
The U.S. military insists its blockade of Iranian ports is holding, a naval noose meant to strangle Iran's economy by keeping it from exporting oil, or at the very least, to force concessions at the bargaining table. Indeed, further negotiations may happen in a matter of days, says U.S. President Donald Trump.
We'll see what happens. I think they want to make a deal very badly.
He talks about the war in the past tense in a previously recorded interview on Fox Business this morning.
I think it's close to over, yeah. I view it as very close to over.
Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian says Iran is not looking for trouble, that it's simply defending itself. Statements from Iran do seem less provocative in the last day or two. It has not reacted militarily to the blockade, despite earlier threats to attack ports in neighboring Gulf states. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance says he left Iranian negotiators with an offer from Trump when talks broke off last weekend.
He wants to make the grand bargain.
An offer Vance suggests would be a step toward normalizing relations between Washington and Tehran. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
And Donald Trump is lashing out at the Pope on social media again. Overnight, Trump said that someone should tell Pope Leo Iran has killed at least 42,000 innocent, completely unarmed protesters in recent months. And he added, it is absolutely unacceptable for Iran to ever have a nuclear bomb. Pope Leo has been vocal about his opposition to the U.S.-Israeli war in Iran. He says he does not fear the Trump administration. Berlin is hosting an international donor conference to address the impact of the Sudanese civil war. The conflict has been marked by massacres, severe food shortages, and the widespread displacement of civilians. The UN calls it the world's forgotten war. The violence erupted 3 years ago today, and as Ithel Musa reports, there's still no end in sight.
Inside a sprawling displacement camp in North Darfur, families gather to collect water. 14 million people in Sudan have been forced to flee their homes as the civil war rages on.
After 3 years of the conflict in Sudan, I think the situation has just gotten worse.
Abdurrahman Ali with the NGO Care Sudan says about 65% of Sudan's total population is in need of humanitarian assistance because of a war being fought between two rival factions: the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF paramilitary.
Both of them have basically waged a war against the Sudanese people.
Khalid Mustafa Medani is a professor of political science and Islamic studies at McGill University.
This is a war about power, a war about retaining resources.
It is estimated that more than 150,000 people have been killed, and sexual violence against women and girls is so widespread the UN says it's become a defining feature of the conflict. Complicating things on the ground now is the U.S.-Israel war with Iran. There are fears the increasing cost of fuel will disrupt the movement of much-needed life-saving supplies. Ithel Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
Advocates for people seeking asylum in Canada say a new Carney government law is putting lives at risk. Bill C-12 was passed last month. It gives Ottawa the power to deport some refugee claimants before a hearing with the Immigration and Refugee Board. Tens of thousands of people have now received letters telling them to leave Canada. CBC News has learned a Trudeau-era immigration minister sought those same powers, but didn't end up getting them. Rafi Boudjikanian has that story.
It is time to make the adjustments to stabilize the immigration system that we need.
Former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in October 2024 setting the stage for a major policy shift on bringing newcomers to Canada.
We will reduce the number of immigrants we bring in over the next 3 years.
It turns out he was being asked for more behind the scenes. CBC News has obtained a letter former Immigration Minister Mark Miller wrote to Trudeau that fall, seeking the ability to stop most migrants from making refugee claims if they've spent more than a year in Canada, and stopping irregular border crossers between Canada and the U.S. from making claims after 2 weeks. Powers that never passed under Trudeau, that he and Miller never publicly spoke about at the time.
Asylum is not a shortcut to immigration.
Current Immigration Minister Lina Diab introduced legislation seeking those exact same abilities, telling a parliamentary committee last October Bill C-12 is needed to deal with the strain of excess asylum claims.
We're building a modern, efficient system.
That legislation passed at the end of March. Diab's office says it cannot comment on why Trudeau did not act on her predecessor's request. The Immigration Department says it expects to send some 30,000 migrants letters telling them their applications for refugee status may be ineligible. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
Ontario is planning to expand its jails, adding thousands of beds over the next 20-plus years. It will increase capacity by more than 60%. Michelle Song takes us through what the Ontario government is planning and why some experts say it won't necessarily keep communities safe.
This is the wrong direction to go in.
After his PhD student obtained provincial documents through Freedom of Information laws, University of Ottawa criminology professor Justin Peguis says his jaw was on the floor, shocked by Ontario's plan to add nearly 6,000 jail beds in 24 years.
We're diverting money away from things that actually could make us safer now. Permanent supportive housing, mental health care in the community, harm reduction.
Peguis says it's unclear where those beds will be added, and Premier Doug Ford has been firm on his tough-on-crime approach.
I don't care if you stack them 10 high. These are criminals that broke the law,
and they're going to be held accountable.
But criminal defense lawyer Natasha Beatman-Brenner says offenders in provincial jails aren't those accused of serious crimes like murder or sexual assault. They go to federal prisons, which aren't part of this plan.
That anyone who is serving a sentence in a provincial jail is serving a sentence that's 2 years or less, 2 years less a day or less, which means that these are individuals who are going to be back out in our communities in pretty short periods of time.
The documents reveal the plan is made up of 3 phases from now until 2050. And the first phase is made up of already approved projects, resulting in more than 1,100 beds in the next 6 years. Michelle Song, CBC News, Toronto.
And finally, a team of Canadian Rangers is coming off a major Arctic endurance test, 52 days patrolling the edge of the Northwest Passage. As the CBC's Murray Brewster tells us, the mission was part endurance test, part high-tech proving ground.
So we just did 5,200 kilometers in the coldest winter that anyone remembers.
Lieutenant Colonel Travis Haynes, commander of the 1st Canadian Ranger Patrol Group. He and 9 other soldiers recently completed a presence patrol, testing cutting-edge surveillance technology against real-world conditions.
But to put it in practical terms, everything freezes, let alone your hands. All comms devices are always made for people without gloves on.
Increasing surveillance across the vast northern frontier is one of the military and the federal government's major preoccupations. The Rangers are often called the country's eyes and ears in the north, but getting what they see and hear in real time into the hands of commanders and decision makers has long been a challenge.
There's no satellite signal, there's no telecom operating up there. You're literally in a completely communications desert.
Elliot Pence is the CEO of Dominion Dynamics, which has developed a software system that pairs with military communications gear and allows the Rangers to communicate and share information among themselves and pass it along instantaneously when there's a downlink available.
Over the last 60 days, what we've created is the ability to push this information up into a web app, a common operating picture, that allows the strategic command to understand and essentially track and trace and follow along.
Pence says it's Canadian technology, which could be useful in the deserts or the jungle or other far-flung locations. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marcy Marcusa. Well, enjoy the next 12 hours or so of spring, because after that, it's going to get a little bit wintry. Again, there's a special weather statement in effect, which could bring some freezing rain to much of southern Manitoba. And there's actually a snowfall warning up north as well. We're going to get the details on that just ahead. But coming up this half hour on the show, perhaps you've been trying to get into the housing market. You've done the math, and you can pull off the monthly payments. But those tens of thousands of dollars you need for that down payment seems like an impossible hurdle. Well, coming up, we're going to hear how a builder, a developer, and a credit union in Steinbach came up with their own solution to that problem. That story coming up right here on Information Radio. Stay tuned. 8:11 right now. Let's check in with Heather Wells with a look at news headlines.
Good morning. Well, evacuations are likely at Peguis First Nation, even as that community north of Winnipeg and the province work frantically to protect homes from another spring flood. Infrastructure Minister Lisa Naylor says if flooding cuts off road access, people would be forced out. The province says the Fisher River will likely start cresting April 23rd. Roseau River First Nation says it will take legal action if the province does not remove a gas main from its territory. The pipeline runs across the First Nation. It will connect 2 stretches of a natural gas pipe set to start construction this year. Roseau River Councillor Rachel Ferreira says they've gone without fair compensation 4 years. More on this story and other Manitoba news coming up at 8:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That's Heather Wells at your CBC News desk. As mentioned, there's some special weather statements in effect, despite a lovely day ahead, at least for the next little while. Abby, what's going on there?
That's true, Corey. One final warm spring day before a late season winter storm hits us tonight. We have a weather statement in effect for Winnipeg and much of southern Manitoba. While we're going to be enjoying these mid-teens that we warm up to today, there's going to be like a stark shift as the conditions will change overnight with a wintry mix of freezing rain along the Trans-Canada corridor. So we're talking about the Red River Valley region and surrounding areas. While up north, we have that yellow warning in effect, talking about snowfall warning. It remains active for a band from the Par all the way towards Flin Flon to the Ontario border. We're tracking 10 to 20 centimeters of snow that will be making travel challenging for today. Now, for Winnipeg, currently mild 2 degrees right now. Clear skies outside. Some areas tracking 3, some areas tracking 4 around the airport. We get to warm to a pleasant high of 18 degrees with gusty south winds, and then this warm's going to be really picking up in the afternoon period. But don't let that fool you. We're expecting that sharp drop around later tonight with a risk of freezing rain and wind chills coming in before tomorrow morning. Most of the regions in the south will see temperatures between 12 and 20 degrees today as we travel towards the Headingley area. So I'll tell you, Corey, yes, we may be heading to a high of 18 today. Lots of sunshine. But remember, the winter gear needs to be back at the door tonight. So you need to get them prepared. If you've put them away, the brush and everything, the system coming through.
My mudroom right now is an absolute disaster because I don't really want to put it away and organize it. I'm hoping eventually I'll put it downstairs. So I just throw all of our kids rain gear and boots and mitts and snowsuits down there.
That's a good plan, my friend, because system coming through tonight, and
I know.
You might be needing those gear tomorrow morning.
Exciting. Well, thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
That's Abby behind the glass. Sierra Sanders, what's going on with the commute?
Yeah, Corey, got a call from Kathy, southbound Main Street, just north of Inkster. She mentioned that it looked to be a truck that lost part of a wheel, or looks to have lost a wheel, so it is blocking the curb lane. So that's southbound Main, just north of Inkster. There's a truck in the curb lane that looks to have lost its wheel there, and she said it comes up pretty fast, so you want to be aware if you are heading in that direction and that's on your commute. As well, I know I kind of left you in the dust with your last pun that on this next traffic tip, but I'm coming back to you with it. We're still hearing about a street sweeper, or stalled street sweeper, I should say, in the curb lane northbound Waverley at Clarence. You want to keep an eye out for that. I know it can get pretty busy on Waverley at this time of the day, so keep that in mind. Still hearing about that stalled street sweeper in the curb lane there. Still a little bit of time left in the show, so give me a call on the CBC commuter line if there is something that is getting in your way. That number is 204-788-3093.
That pun I had half an hour ago was, you don't want to get in a dust up with a street sweeper. Thought it was pretty clever, but I don't think Sierra quite picked up on that one. Well, next up here on Information Radio, the average home price in Manitoba, it's over $400,000. That's according to the Manitoba Real Estate Association. Now, if you want to buy that average house, a small down payment would be about 5% or $20,000, and it's more if you have bad credit or no credit. And if you want to avoid the CMHC insurance, you have to put down 20%. Now, it's a big barrier for people trying to get into the housing market, but a developer, builder, and credit union in the Steinbach area have teamed up to offer mortgages at just a fraction of that price. And CBC's Christopher Garrow is here to tell us more. Good morning.
Good morning.
So tell us about the players here. Who's all involved in this?
Well, it all starts with local developer Waldo Newstetter. He was visiting a Habitat for Humanity village in Florida. It was offering people affordable homes, all situated in that one neighborhood, and he wanted to see if the same model could work here. So in the early 2000s, Newstetter teamed up with Three-Way Builders, another Steinbach company, and started building homes below market value. But he noticed that people wanted to provide these homes to, young people, newcomers, Problem was they couldn't qualify for those mortgages because with climbing home prices, it's that down payment. That's what always gets people. So that's when he came up with his Made in Steinbach solution.
When you have a young family or a mature family, maybe you had a marriage situation that bumped along the way a little bit, and you had to restart, and things happen, right? Life happens, and to save up that, $15,000-$20,000 for your first home is almost impossible for a lot of families. They're living day to day, and they're doing a good job and meeting their commitments, but they can't get into their first home. And so that led me to, I made a call to the Steinbach Credit Union.
So then what happened then when he made that call?
Well, Newstetter spoke to the now former Steinbach Credit CEO, Glenn Friesen, he retired recently, who agreed to offer mortgages requiring that small 1% down payment if Newstetter would provide the money for the rest of the down payment. So Newstetter was able to put down enough money to avoid having to take out that insurance that can cost thousands of dollars through the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, or CMHC, which is often not an option for first-time homebuyers. This saves Newstetter and the new homeowners that thousands of dollars, and here is CEO of Steinbach Credit Union, Curtis Wenberg, to explain.
It helps Steinbach Credit Union because we have more growing membership and we have more mortgages, and we're pleased to see some of these folks move on and pay down their mortgages and then even move to other houses as well. If this is their first home, they move on to the second home, and we broaden our relationship with them beyond the mortgage into deposit products and other things like that, so we benefit. And then the biggest beneficiary is the home buyers.
So that partnership with SCU, along with the construction company, has built over 500 homes in 9 years. And now hundreds more are coming to the community of Mitchell, just down the road from Steinbach. These are in housing communities with single detached homes, duplexes, fiveplexes, whatever kind of fits the family's needs. The families agree to live in the home and not sell it for 3 years. The homes also need a bit of work, like landscaping, finishing the basement. The communities Newstetter builds also have apartment buildings and rental units that he says offer a starting point for people who don't have a credit history, especially people like newcomers.
So tell us about some of the people who are buying these houses.
Well, the people buying these houses are people often new to the country and young families looking to buy their first home. People like sisters Maya Bunk and Bea Hebert. Maya bought a home from Newstetter first, and her sister Bea went for it after seeing it work for Maya. Bea had been renting for years. She was renting it with her husband, trying to save up a big enough down payment. Never could get that money. Now her family lives in a new modern duplex with a garage in a community called Lexington Village on the west side of Steinbach.
I feel like it gives us like a step forward, finally. It always felt like, oh, we're kind of on hold, stagnant, and now it feels like, oh, wow, someone's kind of got your back and kind of sees your situation and wants to help you out and makes it possible.
So now, with all these, like you said, there's tons of these types of mortgages going on now, and Newstetter is now actually has a stake in that game now because he's actually fronting a lot of that money. So what's in this for Newstetter? Is he actually like making money off this, or?
Well, he makes money, but not with this program. He does okay for himself, but the goal with this program is not about making money. That's why he's selling the homes below market value, 8% below appraised value, and he's putting up his own money to back up those mortgages. As the child of Ukrainian newcomers, he told me his story when I met him. His parents left the Russian Empire. They were Ukrainians, leaving that sticky situation in the 1920s, to say the least. And he says he's motivated by to pay it forward, that kindness that his parents experienced when they first moved to Canada. And he also said he's moved by a higher calling.
My faith and living out that faith and giving back to the community, and having a purpose in life, and folks that need a bit of a hand, that it helps them.
And now, what about the Steinbach area itself? How's the wider community benefiting from all this?
Well, Newstetter says it brings hardworking people to Steinbach, people who want good jobs in businesses in around Steinbach, and that everyone benefits from that.
It's a storybook community, the way people are interacting and functioning and know each other, and it appears to be where people watch, keep an eye on each other's families, kids. It's walkable. People have pets, go for a walk, and it seems to exude friendliness, neighborliness, and safety.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for the story. This is such a Manitoba story. Especially something out of Steinbach. It's not surprising. You hear stories like this all the time of people who see a need, and people from within the community themselves step up to fill it. So thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That is Chris Garrow. He is our Steinbach reporter here with CBC Manitoba. And you can read more about this story on our website. Just go to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
On This is Manitoba, we celebrate who we are, and we lean into the challenges here that can make this place even better. I'm Marcy Marcusa, host of This is Manitoba. On the podcast, we tackle one topic in a new episode every Friday. It's always about us, the news, and the people here. Get into some local listening. Find and follow This is Manitoba wherever you get your podcasts.
Local news is in decline across Canada, and this is bad news for all of us. With less local news, noise, rumors, and misinformation fill the void, and it gets harder to separate truth from fiction. That's why CBC News is putting more journalists in more places across Canada, reporting on the ground from where you live, telling the stories that matter to all of us. Because local news is big news. Choose news, not noise. CBC News.
And just a reminder here, so we were speaking with Chris Garrow. He is at our Steinbach Bureau. He's based out of Steinbach. He joined the team not too long ago, and he is part of this wider initiative to get more local reporters on the ground outside of major urban centers. And actually, part of that, too, is actually on our webpage now. We actually have a Southeast Manitoba landing page. And all you got to do is you just got to search CBC and Southeast Manitoba. And there's stories specific to that region of Manitoba now on our CBC webpage. And a similar case actually for Western Manitoba as well. So definitely worth checking out there. Well, we do have some time for some music here on the show. And just mentioning Western Manitoba there, Brandon's own Matt Corey continues to be a staple of the Western Manitoba music scene with his high energy rock sound. And here's a track. It's called Spark in the Sky. It offers a first look at the themes found throughout his recent project. It's called Hollow Sun, and you can catch him live right at home in Brandon on April 23rd at the Dock on Princess. Here he is now with Spark in the Sky on CBC Radio 1.
Woke up staring at the
Well, that was Brandon-based musician Matt Corey with Spark in the Sky. You can catch him live in Brandon, April 23rd at the Dock. Well, coming up this afternoon is Radio Noon, and Marjorie Dowhouse is in to tell us a little bit what you can expect for the call-in today. Hello.
Well, good morning, Corey. As you probably heard yesterday, the Prime Minister making an announcement about suspending the federal excise tax on fuel. So that means about $10 cheaper at the pump for gas, 4 cents. 4 cents for diesel. Again, 10 cents for gasoline, 4 cents for diesel. And so we want to hear from you. How are you feeling about the suspension of the tax? Is that going to help you? We're coming up to warmer weather here. I know we have weather warnings. A lot of people this time of year, though, planning out road trips, traveling a little bit more by road. Of course, the suspension is until Labor Day. What more would you like to see? What else would you like to see that might help you with the cost of living these days? So give us a call and share your thoughts. Call, text us on Radio Noon and join the conversation after 12:30.
Big talker. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Corey.
That's Marjorie Dowhouse. That you can catch her today on Radio Noon. And that call-in, once again, is at 12:35. Well, as Marge mentioned there's that special weather statement in effect now for much of southern Manitoba. You actually expect a late-season winter storm to come overnight into Thursday tomorrow. So it's going to be warm today, but then that temperature is going to plummet, and we could actually see about 4 to 8 centimeters of weird mix of kind of snow and potentially freezing rain there. So look out for that. Could be a slippery commute tomorrow. Right now, though, time for your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it's 4 degrees. Mostly sunny today as we get one day of spring today, a high of 18. It's going to be windy, though, and then, as Corey mentioned, a bit of a change on the way. Time is getting short to protect Peguis First Nation from spring flooding. Infrastructure Minister Lisa Naylor says all the preparations now underway may not be enough.
It's very likely with some significant flooding that despite all this preparation, there will still be evacuations because the flooding could cut off the road. If we're cutting off the road to community, it's not safe to be there. There's not medical care access. Support can't get in and out.
Now, officials are keeping a close watch on coming weather. Peguis and the Interlake are included in that special weather statement about a system bringing snow tomorrow and Friday. While most Manitobans enjoy today's spring warmth, the chief of Peguis First Nation says people in his community grow weary. Stan Bird says it's because spring flooding happens almost every year.
When that season starts to change, this period of spring, and all its beauty, our people don't get to experience that because every year we're facing flood. And it takes away from our people's lives.
Bird says they have just a week to build up dikes made with sandbags, super sandbags, and clay. The province says the Fisher River will likely start cresting April 23rd. Bird says more than 200 homes need protection, and he says in the long term, the low-lying community north of Winnipeg needs retention ponds to protect homes. Another First Nation now to the south of Winnipeg is asking Manitoba to remove a gas main from its land. The line will connect 2 stretches of a hydro pipeline project the province green-lit just last month. Roseau River councillor Evan Roberts says his community faces dangers like pipeline ruptures while not getting any benefits from this project.
It's not tied into our homes. It doesn't heat our homes. It doesn't provide any kind of energy for our community. It just passes through and then it goes on to service neighboring communities in the region.
The community sent a letter threatening potential legal action. Roberts says hydro workers entering Roseau will be told to leave. The province and Manitoba Hydro say they are looking into the matter but cannot comment at this time. A local developer is trying to make home ownership more affordable in Steinbach. Waldo Neustaedter and Steinbach Credit Union are offering mortgages with down payments of just 1%. Neustaedter puts up his own money as collateral. He says he wants to help people in his community become homeowners.
It would come back to my faith and living out that faith and giving back to the community and having a purpose in life and folks that need a bit of a hand, that it helps them.
Steinbach Credit Union has sold hundreds of the mortgages to people having trouble breaking into the housing market. There hasn't been a single repossession or foreclosure. Neustaedter is building a similar development now in nearby Mitchell with more than 200 homes, duplexes, and townhouses. Mark Carney says plans to expand the Port of Churchill are a top priority. The Prime Minister making that comment before meeting with Manitoba Premier Rob Canoe yesterday in Ottawa. Canoe says there is big potential for a trade corridor to Churchill, which would involve improvements to the port, rail access, and other infrastructure. The plan was among several, quote, transformative projects shortlisted by the federal government last year. After yesterday's meeting, Canoe says he and Carney have agreed to explore options to increase the shipment of critical minerals from the port. The Carney government is considering setting a minimum age for social media, just as Australia has. But how to verify users are old enough? The European Union says it's come up with a solution. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen.
It is our duty to protect our children in the online world, just as we do in the offline world. And to do that effectively, we need a harmonized European approach. And today I can announce that we have the answer. Our European age verification app is technically ready.
An Angus Reid poll last month showed 75% support for a Canadian ban on social media for anyone under 16. At the Liberal Policy Convention this past weekend, delegates voted in favor of age limits. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
That's Heather Wells at our CBC News Desk. Sierra Sanders is in with the last look at the commute. Hello.
Hi, Corey. Still hearing about that truck in the going southbound Maine, just north of Inkster. There was a truck that looked to have lost a wheel, and it was blocking the curb lane there. So you want to keep an eye out on there. The caller mentioned, Kathy gave me a call. She mentioned it comes up pretty fast, so you want to be aware of that. And as well, still hearing about that stalled street sweeper at northbound Waverley at Clarence. So you want to keep that in mind. I know it gets busy in that area around that time.
Thank you very much, Sierra.
Thank you.
Abby, final look at the good then bad weather.
Yeah, more like the province bracing for this dramatic seasonal tug of war. The south enjoying the last phase of this beautiful spring before that late season winter storm hits us. We're talking about snowfall coming to most of the central part and a lot of southern parts of the province. Up north, we're looking at 10 to 20 centimeters impacting the power flame. While down south, we are expecting about 4 to 8 centimeters of snow. That should start overnight with some freezing rain.
Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone who helped put together today's show. Marshall Hodgins, our associate producer, as well as Chris Garrow, our reporter in Steinbach. Our news crew, Joni Nicolo, Heather Wells, Alana Cole, and Darren Bernhardt. Nelly Gonzalez is the show producer of Current Affairs. And Leif Larson is our senior producer of audio. I'm Corey Funk, sitting in this week for Marcy Marcusa. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. Stay tuned. The Current is next. Have a good one.